Everyone, thanks for joining us again. If you haven't been here before, just so you know what we do here, Sean and I are both former police officers, and we just have seen just a plethora of these videos, just tons of videos of police interactions with citizens, and they're being viewed out of context and they're having a huge impact on our culture. So we thought we would just get together. We kind of come from things with slightly different perspectives, sometimes vastly different perspectives on things, but we try to have rational conversation about what we're seeing in the videos. Sometimes it can get a little heated, sometimes it's very cordial. It all depends on what we're viewing. What we do is I go on the internet and I try to find videos that have been trending well all week. Lots of people are viewing them, and then the two of us sort of break them down live. I haven't, and Sean hasn't, gone through these and sort of broken them down ahead of time, with the exception of this first one I'm going to show. I saw it, and my friend Slade, hey, Texas Mom in London Blue, thanks for joining us. My buddy Slade, one of the guys who comes on here, grew up in Chechnya, and he's always telling me to check out Russian police videos. So I thought I'd start us off with a nice Russian police video to start out tonight. Of a pursuit.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Russian police officers don't have canines? They actually have bears?
I don't know.
I'm just curious. I've heard that before. I didn't know if that was, ethnicist or what, but I've heard that repeatedly.
I don't know. I know Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think I screwed up his name again, but I know he likes to wrestle bears. He's an MMA guy, so I think it's a thing, wrestling bears in Russia. I don't know, but this is a foot pursuit / vehicle pursuit in Russia, and here we go. No audio on this one, but he's chasing the car on foot in the snow, and then he dives into the vehicle while it's still in motion, almost hits old lady by the snowbank, and then crashes into the snowbank. So
why was dude running like he was T-1000 from Terminator?
I don't know. Let's see that. Let's see that again, but. Hey, so maybe it is the T-1000 from Terminator. I don't know, but
just another gift from Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. And this lady's just going about her business, not bothering anybody, and then there's wrecks into the snowbank. Anyway, I thought that was badass. So I don't know. I thought that was a good way to start off. So next one we've got. I don't really have any info. It's something about an officer rescuing somebody who's been pinned under a vehicle. So just so you guys know, a lot of these videos are violent. There's police shootings, there's pursuits, but every once in a while something trends that's not violent. It's just something involving the police. So that's all I have is someone being pinned underneath of a vehicle.
Definitely graphic in nature. So this is in Mesa, actually.
Have you seen this one?
Do you have a jack?
You did?
There's one right there. That's what broke. There's one on this one.
Oh, that's a bad day. He's got an ASU lanyard there. Oh my God, he's trapped under the car.
Try to lift it up and pull him out.
If we can.
Right here.
Try to see if we can move it first.
See if you can pull him. Pull him out.
Pull him out. Come on.
Oh, they got him out.
The ambulance there.
Okay, so he's not pinned that bad. It's not like the whole vehicle is.
We got him out.
Right?
Not that bad.
I mean,
I think the car was mad at the Birkenstocks for what it's worth.
Yeah, it could be. He doesn't look super injured. Am I being heartless here?
Well, at first maybe, but as soon as he put his arms up, I think that's when it's safe to crack a joke.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if he was laying there full of blood, I'd be like super worried, but or even like he wasn't moving, but he looks okay to me. So I don't know. I feel like when I see person is going to be trapped under a vehicle, I'm just expecting a little bit something.
He's conscious, breathing.
I don't know.
Sitting up on his own. So
it sounds like the officer. Sounds like the officer's kind of saying, "Oh, he's sitting up. He's fine." I don't blame him.
Texas Mom, Shelby, London Blue, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Sorry about last week. We were trying to get things right and improve some video quality, and things kind of got screwy there.
And I've been doing all the setup on this streaming thing, so it's like a big giant house of cards. So if like one card went missing, then it all fell apart, and I couldn't get it back together. But we got it all sorted now, and Sean hooked us up with a great guy who walked us through the audio and the video, and it was really helpful. And I think this is going to be more stable than it was before. So I don't think there's. I don't know if there's anything.
It's like it compressed on the whole frame.
I think
Or it
he's
slid
fine.
off of the frame and went up into.
Oh, I was under there trying to clip in the undercarriage, and it just
Probably
must
slipped
have
off and
bumped
went.
it, or oh gosh.
Yeah, he's gonna
Nah,
have
he's
some sore
all right.
ribs. Yeah, he's fine. He's
Did you
fine.
ever break a rib?
I've cracked ribs, but I've never had one that was like
Stand under it.
diagnosed as like you've got broken ribs. But I think actually, as this, I don't know for sure that I've broken ribs, but I'm pretty sure I've cracked ribs. If that makes any sense.
Yep.
The jacket.
All right, I'm gonna move on to the next one. All right, this next one we've got is critical incident briefing from the Pomona Police Department. Where's Pomona? It's in California. But where is it? Do you
LA
know?
suburb.
It's LA suburb? Is it like right,
Yeah.
like LA, straight up LA suburb, or is it like a ways away?
It's East LA County, if I recall
Okay.
correctly.
Hey Shelby, thanks for coming by. Raven, how's it going? All right, let's roll this and see what we got
A
here.
community briefing about an officer-involved shooting that occurred June 29, 2020 on Monte Vista Avenue south of the 10 freeway in the city of Montclair. This critical incident community briefing will utilize information obtained as part of an ongoing investigation that includes, but is not
In
limited
these
to,
videos, they
surveillance video,
I tell us that, and they say this in every
dispatch audio,
broadcast, but
dash camera,
police departments
and body-worn
nowadays,
camera
they
footage.
are creating these like
Body-worn
videos
cameras
just to
are
be
worn at
transparent and
test
share
level
information with the
capture a
community.
perspective of what is in camera view.
And they,
Footage
some of
may
them
or
are
may
like
not
really
reflect
highly
what an
produced,
officer
some of them not
actually
so
sees.
good.
Pomona police officers
But I
responded
find it
to a
interesting
request
that
from the
police
Portland
departments
Air
have felt
Support
that this
Team
is
helicopter for
necessary to do now,
assistance
that there's so much of this out there that they feel as though they need to package it for us.
The shooting occurred when the suspect stepped out of his vehicle and pointed a gun at officers.
Is it a packaging or a timing thing? I mean, it could be both, obviously, but I've always felt like first and foremost, it's a timing thing. The world has started moving way quicker than your average, county attorney homicide investigation. And, that's to me where the rub has been is every other industry and channel, that we get information from is 24/7 and it's live, in real time. And, police departments are like, oh, slow down. We need to spend at least 6 months investigating this
Right.
before we release anything. So in some way, I think, as long as it doesn't go past to the other extreme where they are irresponsibly releasing information that's tainting investigations.
Right.
Like on some level, I'm okay with them speeding up the process because, there's a balancing act between society moving along technologically and, departments having to keep up. So
yeah, it's a it's a balancing act that they've got to walk a line, and I can totally see them feeling pressured into releasing video and doing it too soon and compromising investigations, especially when an incident could lead to violence in the street. And you feel you have to weigh that. You have to say, look, if we don't release this may compromise our investigation, but this could lead to violence. That's a tough decision. I don't want to be making that decision. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. I think, I'm glad that they've got a little bit of pressure and the other side too is like, is there ever going to be enough, right? And I think that's something
I don't think so. I don't think there's ever going to be enough shared. I don't think people are going to be happy. I think it's going to be, I honestly don't know how, because this is so unprecedented. We've never lived in a society where images of police violence or state violence, because it used to be soldiers or whatever, were just created and then shared over and over and over again by so many people. It used to be that you needed to be there to see it or you heard a story about it, but now it's, and I don't know how society is going to manage it. It's an unknown. I don't know. And I just looked at the description of this, and this is a request for assistance reference a homicide suspect.
To assist with a car stop of a Fresno murder suspect.
Which right off the bat, I'm sure Sean, you agree. That's like immediately you're like, oh shit, this could be dangerous. And that's the data tell us that as well. When I look at homicide, how often do homicides show up in fatalities involving the police? It's like way higher than the percentage of homicides that compose like the population that calls for service. Like homicides are very rare, right, Sean? Like as a police officer. So I'm going to pause this for 1 second. So like Sean, when you're a police officer is it fair to say that it's pretty rare that you get dispatched to go pick up a homicide suspect? It's not like domestic violence or shoplifting. It's like they don't happen every day, right?
Can I rephrase your question? And how often do you go to a call that deals with a homicide suspect?
Well, yeah, there might be, right? Yeah. There might be, yeah. So there might be like you have to go to do something about a homicide, but like as an actual percentage of how police incidents.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking
neighborhood by neighborhood, but
Sure.
I think that's the interesting thing, right? Like, and in one city, take Phoenix, Arizona, for instance. Like, you could go months in a certain precinct or a certain part of the city and not have a homicide call.
Right.
And you can go to 3 in a 4-day, work week in other precincts. So I would say generally for most officers across the country, yes, it's a rarity, but it certainly depends if you're in violent neighborhoods or.
But even in a violent neighborhood, like a homicide is going to be way rarer than an armed robbery, even, or like if it's going to be.
There's a fine line too, right, between a homicide and ag assault. You go to ag assaults on a nightly basis.
Yeah, ag assaults.
If the bullet's an inch in one direction.
Yeah, sure. But
we're saying the same
typically for every homicide you roll into, you're going to get 20 or I don't know what the number is, but quite a few ag assaults, robberies. So there's very rare instances. But if you look at how often, if you look at all the people who die during police contacts, a non insignificant portion of those are homicide related, which is a big signal that the level of violence displayed by suspects is strongly associated with the likelihood of police using lethal force. I mean, it just makes sense that if you're dealing with homicide suspects, they don't have shit to lose because they already killed somebody. They're going to prison. They've already shown the willingness to kill somebody. So it's dangerous. So just the long tangent, but they're dealing with a homicide suspect. That shit's dangerous, basically.
Exactly.
Responded and followed as the suspect drove
So you got an air unit here, right? You got traffic. So it's not like maybe I'm making too big of a reach here, right? But it's not like you're going to pick up a homicide suspect with the SWAT team and the homicide detectives. Like, it seems like it was probably more of a recent crime.
Right.
Just based off of how it's kind of flowing. So air unit's good, but, heavy traffic is good and bad, right? Like, it's not uncommon for criminals, especially people who've committed crimes recently, to react in a way where it's almost paranoia, right? They're like, oh, every car behind me is a cop following me. And that's how you end up seeing a lot of bad traffic stops, right? Because the suspect knows something the officer didn't. He really was just pulling them over because they had a tail light out. Suspect just did XYZ wrong and things go sideways. So,
right.
Yeah,
they're always, these are always, and I know like you and I have done stops where even if you're sort of sideways dealing with someone related to a homicide investigation, there's an added level of alert. Just the types of people that not always, but just tends to be true that the people, if you're investigating homicides, the people they're dealing with, their cohort is usually just, a little extra dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you're friends with guys that are out there killing people, and a lot of homicides are like family homicide. Those are, a little different. I'm talking about like, the straight up homicide. Yeah, like the. All right, so this is the vehicle sort of stopping right here.
The suspect pulled the car over,
and he's lighting them up. I can see the police lights in the reflecting here. So we got at least 3 patrol cars here, they said.
Then exited his vehicle, pointed a gun at officers, and that's when the officer-involved shooting occurred.
Spoiler alert.
Officers involved in the shooting are Sean Gonzalez, Cynthia Burciaga, Baneric Mendoza.
All right, he's going to wheel a right here.
Here is the camera footage from Officer Burciaga's dash cam.
All right, he yields. Now I wonder if this vehicle up in front of him, Sean, does that look like are you thinking that's a police officer, the way that it rolled in the front of him and slowed? Almost like they were getting ready to do a street jump.
It could be. It looks like the vehicle in front, which is maybe like a gold Corolla or something like that, has its caution lights on. So it could be. You know, it's tough to tell because
Yeah, who
on the
knows?
flip side is if it's not, and you've got two vehicles pulling over, and you're the officer who's in the lead car, you automatically are thinking, okay, great, now I've got two cars to deal with. It was bad to have one homicide suspect in one vehicle, but what's the other one, and that may not be the case here.
Yeah, who knows? I just noticed the odd behavior. So if I was in this patrol car pulling it over and that wasn't a police officer, I'd be like kind of freaked out right now. Like who the hell is this?
And my thought is, if it's a police officer, we should see it coming back pretty quick. There you go. So it's
think, oh, wow, he just got out and went after it. Could also be that other car thought that they were getting pulled over and they were just
Yeah. Yep. Fortunately, got the hell out of Dodge.
They got out of Dodge, although I think I see it down there, so I should focus on this guy. All right. Whoa, I see trees. So this is an idea just of we might be missing. Keep an eye on this tree line here, Sean, when the officers are shooting. A little high and to the right, fellas.
The windshield wipers are on in the Kia, too.
Yeah. Oh, and he's down. But he's still active. See, so here's the thing. This guy's down. So initially, when you watch this, you're like, okay, well, this guy's down. You don't keep shooting at him. But if he's already got out of the car and shot at officers, just because he's on the ground doesn't mean he can't still shoot at you. So if he's rolling around, he's not putting his hands out to the side and surrendering, then that's still an active gunfight as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so like the term would be a lull, right? So something happens that allows you, because all the officers on the suspect there, they're going 100 miles a minute. Like the normal state that we walk around in everyday life, even if you're excited and you're just listening to a song that you really like and you're stoked about something, doesn't even compare to the level of adrenaline that both parties are experiencing there.
Absolutely.
And typically it takes what they call a lull, something that's like a pause for everybody to like reset for a second, right? So sometimes, and really, the cue for officers typically is the suspect stopping what he's doing. So if he's shooting at you, shooting and moving, once he goes down, you're going to pause. It's not over by any means.
Right.
But that allows the officers to reset, figure out tactically if there's something else they need to be doing, and it gives them a moment there to kind of recalibrate.
Right. All right, let's see. So he's still on the ground. He's starting to get back up, and there's more rounds. Looks like he's taking fire from over here somewhere as well. I don't know where from.
Here's the camera footage from Officer Gonzalez.
All right, so this is the passenger of the patrol car. Gets out and immediately met by gunfire. It sounds like Texas Mom is sharing this stuff with people. Thank you, Texas Mom. I really appreciate it.
Yes, totally do. Like, subscribe,
Here you can see where the
throw some
suspect's
hearts up
gunfire
on
damaged
Periscope if that's where you're at.
including the front driver's side windshield. Here is a photo of the suspect's gun.
All right, so this is guy's handgun, and this is one of those ones.
Officers rendered medical aid.
Okay, and this is
To a
important.
local hospital where he succumbed to his injuries.
Judgmental of me. I'm like, why did they find a bag of cocaine?
Yeah, I thought it was cocaine as well.
He was treated at the scene.
Oh, shame on our priors.
Identified as 34-year-old Nick Torres.
So,
Gonzalez.
That's the other thing. As soon as this guy's down, the officers, they didn't really show it, but officers have an obligation to try to render aid when it's safe and practical to do so. Go ahead, Sean. I interrupted you.
I thought he had a tattoo on his chin. It was just his driver's license photo.
I think that's actually an interesting shot there, just to show this to everybody here. I'm going to pause it 1 second here.
Ongoing investigation.
Just to give everyone an idea why it takes so long to conduct these investigations. So just before anyone leaves the scene of this, what happened here, every single piece of brass, which is like the expended cartridges from every round that was fired from every officer, from the bad guy, everyone who was driving by in those vehicles needs to be stopped, separated, and interviewed. All of those officers are going to be interviewed by like 3 different people. For this, they're going to bring in machines to scan this area maybe, or take really good photographs. They're going to have to collect and impound and photograph everything they pick up. It's this really long, monotonous process. And then every officer who's there, everyone who's involved is going to write all kinds of reports on everything they do, reports on evidence, reports on all these steps as it goes through, and it literally could take a year, 2, 3 years sometimes for a thorough investigation of a homicide, which this is. This guy was shot and killed by the police. It's a homicide. It's treated like any other homicide should be by a professional organization, which I have no reason to think this organization won't be. Treated like any other homicide, where they go through and do a thorough investigation. So that's why, what Sean and I were talking earlier about why it takes so long to get this stuff out.
Yeah. Rebecca, what is it about it that gets you infuriated out of curiosity? Suspect basically jumped. It was a homicide suspect. Marked units lit him up, and he jumped out of the car and started firing at
the police.
The police officers. So they returned fire. Eventually were able to stop him from shooting after he moved around the car and so forth.
And a lot of these, I look at them and I'm like, oh, well, there's a lot of room for improvement. There's problems. There's this, there's that. And this is one of those ones where every once in a while I turn it on and I'm like, well, what are you going to do? You have a homicide suspect. You try to pull him over. He gets out, starts shooting at you. It's a gunfight. So I don't really. Did you see anything in this that made you pause? Made you, other than them trimming the trees 10 feet above the suspect with their rounds?
I would just say that, one thing to keep in mind there is the officers, they're already behind the curve, right? So once rounds are coming down range at their vehicles, they're a second or two behind the suspect. So now you're trying to catch up and stop him from shooting you under extreme duress. Right. And it's a challenging tactical situation. I think we frequently have heard like, oh, well, why didn't they do this? And more or less it amounts to, why wasn't there a bigger threat before they responded that way? And, this kind of exemplifies how, it's challenging because now you're trying to hit a moving suspect in a crowded area. There's tons of traffic on the left side of the frame. And that means typically that, you need to end up putting a lot more rounds downrange because you're just under that much more stress and you're behind the curve and you're trying to catch up.
And have every officer who's there is interpreting this threat at the same time. So it's not one officer firing all these rounds. It's everybody firing 5-6 rounds, and those add up really quickly. I don't think there's much else here on this one. Let me just make sure. So this is the officers. They're going up, moving up with a shield and handgun coverage, and they're doing that so that they can render aid to the suspect. Because no matter what happens, as soon as it's safe to do so, it doesn't matter what this guy did. He could have gone and murdered his mother. It doesn't matter. We have an obligation. I would say police officers have an obligation to render aid, and it looks like these guys developed a plan and went up and rendered aid. So that's good to see.
Yeah. By the way, this is a place for everybody to be civil and ask questions. It's not that we can't agree, but if you're going to be disrespectful and profane, then we're just going to boot you.
Okay, I didn't see. Okay. All right. Sorry, you're gone, dude. So yeah, like Sean said, if people are on here from either side of the political spectrum, if you just jump on here and start talking shit to each other, we're just gonna get rid of. I'm stressed already coming in here just from the general stress that our society's under right now. So we don't need to be at each other's throats, even if we disagree on something. Like I know several people who come in here every week who disagree, but then they come back the next week and they're civil to each other. So it can totally be done. And I have a terrible time doing it myself sometimes. So I'm probably the worst person to be lecturing. But anyway,
can we get me a mute button for when you misbehave and I put you in a penalty box?
Yeah.
Like for a minute or something like that. We're gonna have to. That'll be like phase 2 technology. So
I need to. Yeah, I think. I don't know. I think it's
we get timeout buttons for
absolutely.
each other. No,
I think it's. I mean, it's extraordinary times right now. So I think it's perfectly understandable that people are upset. But let's not call each other motherfuckers and stuff. All right, we got the next one. We got critical incident. It's going to be from the Pomona Police Department again. There were 2 of them up there, so they released 2 incidents this week that sort of got a lot of Sit him in the corner, Texas Mom. I agree. Me or Sean, Texas Mom. Maybe both of us need to go to the corner. All right, Pomona and Chino.
Pomona border.
Do anything wrong yet.
This critical incident
There's still
community
time.
briefing will utilize information
What's that thing
there?
there?
The ongoing investigation
What's this here?
includes, but is
Oh,
not
this is the
limited
body
to,
cam.
911
So they're
calls,
giving us our little
surveillance
intro,
and body-worn camera footage.
explaining that where the footage comes from. We didn't have body cams when I was officer. You didn't have one, did you, Sean?
What an officer actually sees.
I
No.
did not. How do they work?
So I think they have to push a button to activate them, right?
The suspect
I
was
think.
identified as 35
Most,
It
yeah.
depends. I think it depends on the manufacturer.
Pomona police officers
Yeah,
were
they're-
first
I
on
mean,
scene after receiving
Taser, I
multiple
think, is one of the,
reports that a
Yeah.
more prominent
Yeah.
ones.
pointed a gun at multiple people. It was also reported that he attempted to carjack.
All right, so this guy had pointed a gun at
After a
multiple
search that
people.
took several minutes,
and-
officers located the suspect in an industrial area near the Chino-Pomona border.
So he pointed a gun and said, "We're gonna try to
The shooting
carjack
occurred when
somebody."
The suspect assumed a shooting stance and pointed a gun at
Yeah, that'll
officers.
do it.
The shooting is the subject of 3 comprehensive and independent investigations. The San
Slade the
Bernardino
Enlightened
County
busting
Sheriff's
out
Department will
the
conduct
Chechen
criminal
proverbs.
investigations
You missed
into
the
actions
Russian
of
video
the
earlier,
officers.
Slade.
Once
Slade's
completed,
my
the
Chechen friend who
investigation will be
recommended
submitted
that I
to
throw
San
the
Bernardino
Russian videos. We showed one earlier of a Russian police
The
foot
Pomona
pursuit.
Police Department will also review the case.
T-1000.
I got another Russian video in here actually, so we'll show that. We'll show that next, in honor of Slade.
No conclusions will be made until the investigations are completed. A word of caution. The images and language you are about to see and hear may be disturbing, especially to
I've been learning watching UFC fights that when I see
The
a
incident began with a call for service at the Jack in the Box.
when I
in
hear a
Pomona,
Russian fighter come out in the
near
UFC to like
Reservoir
Russian
Avenue and
music,
Riverside Drive in
that
the city
if
of
I
Chino.
were a fighter, that would be like my worst nightmare, is hearing the Russian music as the MMA fighter comes out, because there just seem to be like a different kind of strong and like, I don't know. Am I being anti-Russian here?
Avenue and Riverside Drive in Chino.
No, I think
One caller
you've
said
been
the suspect
flattering to
pointed
Okay,
the gun,
yeah.
causing him to veer
Yeah.
off the side of the road and crash his Nissan Rogue. Another reported the suspect pointed a gun at her in what was deemed to be an attempted carjacking. The first call came
Keep
from
your doors
a
locked when you're driving.
employee.
Absolutely.
Always keep your doors locked when you're driving.
Pomona Police Operator 30, can I help you?
Excuse me, I got a call from a lady that was driving to the drive-thru. That she saw a guy with the gun.
Okay.
Yeah, check it out, Slade. All right. So this sounds like
You're on the reservoir one? Okay. So a customer called and told you that?
Yeah, a customer that was passing by.
so a customer told him that someone tried to carjack him, basically.
No, she just said it was skinny and wearing like a gray shirt like that.
And it was a man?
Man, yeah.
Okay, so he was male white, he was thin, wearing a gray shirt?
Like he was next to a gray car.
But he had a gray shirt also?
Yeah.
The second 911 call came from the area near South Reservoir Street.
I'll
in
turn up the
Walnut.
audio on this here a little bit here.
911.
Yeah.
Operator 17, state your emergency.
I was driving on the street and a guy stopped in the middle of the road and pointed a gun at me, and I just whipped my car into the grass.
All right, I got it maxed out. I think it's kind of a low audio video.
It's better though. It should be good, right, Marcy?
Yeah, he's running. He's running through bushes.
Okay.
He's running.
Okay, sir, listen.
So here's one thing that I think of is like a lot of times you get a single call saying, oh, there's some guy with a gun, there's just some crazy shit happening, and you're like, okay, there's some crazy shit happening. I'm gonna assume there is some crazy shit happening and roll in carefully, but then there's times where you get a call and then you start rolling out, and then somebody else calls in and says the same story, and then you get a third caller, and at that point you're like, okay, there's definitely something afoot here.
Yeah, no, it adds to it when you start having 2 independent callers with corroborating information. It takes you from, okay, it could be happening, to, all right, this is happening. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of times, like, you know, fortunately, we'll get 4 or 5 calls sometimes, like depending on how long it takes to get there and what exactly it is going on. Like, people generally will, you know, call the police when there's crazy things going on. So that's good.
Right. That's a good question. Someone just asked what percentage of these shootings end up being suicide by police. And I've actually been looking at a whole year's worth of every person that died we tried to get a count of everyone that died in the United States during a year and tried to quantify that, like count how many are suicides, and all I can say is it's a significant portion, but the problem is that a lot of times you don't know, because you read the account, you read the description, you think, I think that's a suicide, but you can't, because the way they're behaving, but there's a lot of times there's no way to know. So I guess the answer to your question, Tuna, would be it all depends on how you measured it and how you determined, okay, this is a suicide or this is not, and so if that kind of answers the question. But what I can say is that it is a significant portion of those, a non-insignificant portion of those are suicide by cops.
Yeah, the one caveat I would add too is like, you can have something that began as a spontaneous crime, right? Like, this may not be the case in this instance, but Tom and I have seen this play out a million times, right? Suspect, is a twice convicted felon. He starts doing something that he knows is going to send him back to prison. And initially it was like, oh, I'm just doing a carjacking at the Jack in the Box because I'm trying to get away from XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the law's bearing down on him. And then he starts behaving in a way that, leads you to believe it's suicide by cop.
Right.
So
yeah, and a lot
sometimes they change too.
A lot of it is like Raven said. There's people who just rather die than go back to prison. I'm gonna tell a little side story. Do you remember the case where the guy Sean shot himself on the Fox News, live on Fox News? When we were officers. Anyway,
no.
So there was a guy.
I would need more to remember.
So now I was working plainclothes and doing surveillance that day, on the day it happened, and this call came out of a guy trying to do a carjacking at Denny's, and he sort of got in the car and waited for a little while after he did the carjacking, and then took off when we started rolling in. The patrol car started rolling in, and he cranked off a couple rounds in the area towards the patrol cars, and it turned into this big pursuit. And I was in a plane marked vehicle, so started following him out on the freeway. We headed like way out of the city, and he got out of his car and took off running. The Fox News was broadcasting it live. It was Shepard Smith, and they didn't cut away in time, and the guy shot himself in the head. And the day it happened, we're there. I'm on scene, and someone clears on the radio. I wasn't right up next to him. I was back at the vehicles, and someone gave out some tattoo information over a secure channel, and I gave it to one of my partners on my squad, called them on the phone and said, hey, here's the tattoo information. They look him up, and we ended up IDing him. Well, it turns out it was somebody that I had sent to DOC, to prison, like 4 years before, and they had just gotten out on my charges and were on parole for my charges, and had just found out that they'd been violated for their parole. So it looked like the whole thing was, I'm going to go do a carjacking, draw the police in so that I can go out in like a blaze of glory kind of a thing. So anyway.
Was this the Denny's at 67th and is it Thomas?
75th in the I-10.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We had some meals there.
Yeah, I would go there for anyway, the guy, I had actually put him in prison on a weapons offense. But anyway, it was.
White, black, Hispanic,
that's a morbid story, anyway.
White with a hat, a black hat, gray shirt.
I have tons of morbid stories.
So you think it was a gun?
Morbid stories
Yeah.
with Tom.
100%
New spin-off.
Here is a photo of the traffic collision. Several minutes later,
Yeah.
the Chino Police Department also
People
received
began a
call
high-speed
of
chase
man
and then
walking openly with a gun, pointing it at drivers.
Yeah, so I think there is some truth to that. So there are some instances where people, because the way things are structured, and not to go railing against the prison system in the United States, but I'm going to do it for a second, is maybe we wouldn't have people being willing to blow their brains out on national television to avoid going to prison if our prisons looked a little bit more like Norwegian prisons. But I'm just saying.
Pointing a handgun at all the
Doesn't have to be Norwegian prisons, but just look a little bit more like Norwegian prisons.
I'm sorry, sir. It was really hard for me to hear you. Where is this happening?
It is on Riverside Drive, and I think it's the street is.
You think prisons do a good job of rehabilitating people in the United States, Sean?
And can you see him?
I thought you were asking Shelby that.
Around the same time, a woman who said the suspect tried to carjack her called 911.
Chino Police, Brianna. CHP with a transfer for a male with a gun at Reservoir Street and Riverside Drive.
Lots of calls coming in for this. Wow.
I was getting ready to make the left turn on Riverside, but then he was
And you can hear
coming
this
at me,
person
and I
freaked
saw that
out.
he
It's
had a gun, and he was pointing it at
like
me.
all of these
What kind
incidents
vehicle
are
was he
real
in? Was he in a
people. So like
vehicle?
when you have someone go
No,
point a
no, he
gun
was
and
on
carjack
the
somebody,
street.
that's like
He was walking.
might be
He
the
was not
most
in the picture.
traumatic
He was
event of their entire
walking.
life.
And
Like
he's from
probably
down
is. I
on,
mean,
on Reservoir. I'm just scared that he's gonna,
yeah, I would agree, Shelby. I think they're counterproductive, and we end up institutionalizing people a lot of the time, and it's counterproductive.
Officers arrived in the area and observed the suspect fleeing with the gun into an industrial area.
No white, black hat, blue shirt, blue jeans, and brown boots.
Copy, suspect in all white wearing a black hat, blue shirt, blue jeans, and brown boots.
Okay, they got descriptions on this guy.
Pomona officers began searching for the suspect. The suspect fled with
covering
the
a lot
weapon
of ground
from the
there.
area of Reservoir and
Yeah,
Walnut
and this
to
is the kind
nearby
of situation where you
industrial
got to
area.
find this guy. You can't have
Here
some
is
guy out
body-worn
with a
camera
gun
footage of officers searching
carjacking
the
people,
area.
pointing guns at people because someone could get killed.
Yeah,
So-
because that first call was up at South Reservoir and Walnut, right at the Jack in the Box. So he's covered, 2 blocks so far.
Uh-huh.
Big industrial blocks. Yeah, Tuna, I'd agree with you on the prison thing, but I figured we'd open up a can of worms with Tom later in the episode.
I'm just practical and say, well, what works in the criminal justice system? And if your goal is to reduce crime, then you want to rehabilitate people. And punitive incarceration, sometimes you need to lock people away and segregate them from society because they're dangerous, I'll agree. So like, you may need to put people in prison their entire life, but making them miserable and torturing them just doesn't really help anything.
Right down the floor. Hey, he ditched the hat.
So this is something suspects will do sometimes too, is seasoned or experienced criminals will know that descriptions are coming out based off of maybe what they were wearing at first. So sometimes they will wear multiple layers of clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll just try to alter their appearance. And we're not talking like, the fugitive Harrison Ford type thing. It's more like,
throw your shirt
I'm
in the
running.
dumpster.
Just north of our
Yeah, and I'm going to take my brown t-shirt off and my hat, throw that in the dumpster, and now I got a white tank top.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. Anything to just add some uncertainty to the next innocent caller who may potentially see you and call the police.
I've had
Or
people,
officer.
I've had people tell me in interviews that they wear multiple
Pomona
shirts so they can
officers
ditch
found the
their
suspect
shirt.
several minutes later,
It's
near a
like to
loading
wear
dock.
you wear a red
Officers
shirt or you
ordered
wear a
him to
green
put up
one
his
underneath of
hands,
it in
but he
case you
didn't
bail out of a
comply.
car when you go out at night. It makes sense, it's smart.
Also shows the mental state. And same thing, I've had people in interviews say, yeah, I had shorts under, pants for the same reason too. So like,
Yeah. Most young people I dealt with, they had pants and they had shorts underneath, and they always had a couple shirts on. People who were, serial offenders and people who were constantly involved with the police.
so this is not a great spot to get in a gunfight or have to
No.
approach somebody.
Let me see
Really.
your fucking hands, dude.
Okay. All right, they found him. I don't see him.
Hey, I got him over here, I think, underneath this semi.
Oh, he's underneath this semi, they're saying. All right, so you got an armed suspect underneath of
emerged in
a
shooting
semi. That's
stance
scary.
when an officer-involved shooting occurred.
Hey, Rick! Drop the gun! Drop the fucking gun! Drop the gun! I got it. 908, suspects down.
That's one thing I noticed watching these is there's this immediate desire to put out the 998 call, the call out the shooting, even though there's like 5 of you actively engaged in the gunfight. It's not, I'm not saying it's about, I'm just saying like you feel obligated to put out the info on the radio.
Let's call it what it is too. There's another thing I think you and I would say about that though, right? Maybe that's a leading question.
Go ahead.
I think it's a very common part of becoming a police, at least my experience becoming a police officer, where the ultimate test will be when you get in a shooting, right? Or whatever that circumstance is. So when you finally get there, I think there's a bit of a, how do I want to say it? I want to make sure I choose my words, correctly, but you're laying claim to like the ultimate challenge that you could face by putting that out. Yeah, I don't mean to go all Freud on it, but like there's certainly that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Plus you're trying to get the cavalry to come if they're not always already there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's one of the most. I think most police officers who work in major American cities, they think about the thought of getting into a gunfight, and they think about it a lot. And a certain percentage of those officers, and I would say the people who probably prepare for it the most and are most well equipped to manage it safely and effectively, and least likely to just shoot someone for a stupid reason because they make a mistake, like the people who are training and preparing for it, it's not that they're like, I want to get into shooting, but it's like, I actually kind of want to get into shooting because I want to test and see how I perform and if I manage it properly. And I also feel as though that's going to happen. I would rather it be me than somebody who's not going to manage it well. So it's kind of like, that may sound kind of like a sick thing to say, and like that officers would, that's not. I think it's like if you practice football all year to play football,
you want to be in the game.
In the game, if the game is happening, you may, like you're not wanting someone to get killed, but you're like, there's going to be a shooting. I want to be there, because I'm training for that. It's weird. It's difficult to explain.
Yeah. No, I think you hit it on the head. I think that's a fair. It's not as necessarily deep, but like it's a fair comparison for sure. And like, given how deep we're gonna go into it tonight. Quick question: prior to your 998, did you ever have the dream where your gun wasn't working?
All the time, yeah.
In some manner, shape, or form.
All the time.
Did you have it after?
I don't remember. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know.
Yeah. Freaky dream to have.
The weed thing that I just
no. I saw that. I'm like, oh, Tom's going to jump on
just an interesting point about that is the guy who shot himself in the head. So I did some research on this guy, not just in PD records, but there's actually like a nice article that was written. Someone did some investigative reporting, and I locked him up for a weapons offense. So I arrested him because he did a shoplifting while he was armed with a handgun, and the officer that arrested him just basically cited him for his shoplifting and impounded the gun and didn't do anything. And I looked at this guy and I'm like, well, he's all tatted up. He's got a bunch of prison tattoos. He's got to be a prohibited possessor. So I did some research, found out, hey, this guy got released with a citation, but he was committing a felony when he did that shoplifting because he was armed with a gun and he had a felony conviction, which in Arizona you can't be armed with a gun while while you have a conviction for a felony. So, but the charge that he was a prohibited possessor for was a possession of cannabis charge. So he got arrested for weed, got made a convicted felon, and then when I arrested him for the shoplifting, he was armed. But according to, a lot of people are armed in Arizona. But anyway, I just think it's kind of interesting that she mentions weed and how I feel about it.
Generally, if it was real quick, and it's not going to change how you feel about it, but like generally in Arizona, if you're arrested for marijuana and it stays a felony, you had amounts that you were dealing, not possessing.
He had like 4 or 5 different times he got arrested with weed before he got his felony charge. So it wasn't that he was dealing, it was that he got over and over. I think he failed some piss tests and that kind of a thing. And he got caught up in it. And it was years before that he got that felony conviction. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, you're typically, I think you're absolutely right. And I think over the years where we were policing, there had been a sort of pullback from the possession sort of enforcement type of thing, whereas in the late 1990s and early 2000s it was a much more rigorous,
different animal.
Much more rigorous enforcement. But all I'm just saying is that it does happen. So anyway, okay, so where were we? All right, the shooting. We saw
Drop the fucking gun.
He's still moving around with the gun.
Here is a screenshot that shows the suspect in a shooting stance.
Shooting stance, pointing the gun at the officers.
Do you want me to leave the firearm there?
That's
Do you want me
that's
to leave
good
the firearm there?
editing. I like when they do this in these CIB videos because it's really tough to see when it's moving,
Yeah.
right?
There is a
Oh,
photo of
absolutely.
the gun
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
recovered at the scene.
I,
It was later determined to be an
I think that's
gun.
definitely worth doing.
The suspect succumbed to his injuries at the scene. It is currently unknown to what extent drugs or alcohol may have played in the suspect's behavior, as the toxicology results from the coroner's office are not yet
Yeah, or
available.
mental health or
The information
whatever.
in this
Who
briefing is
knows?
based on a preliminary
Doesn't change anything.
ongoing investigation.
Doesn't matter if a person has a mental health problem if they're pointing a gun at you. So just let me show my second. You got any comments on that one, Sean? Before I show the next one.
A challenging spot to get in a gunfight. Yeah, especially because there's no cover.
Right.
You know, so potentially there's opportunities to try to create space once he's under that, but you know, it's really tough to you start your chase instinct kicks in. You start going towards it, even in this instance where you know it's a suspect with a gun. So, you know, in this instance, since it's just a flat asphalt yard, distance is probably your friend, and you probably can court him off. And as long as there's no risk of him getting inside that building where you don't know what's going on, there's probably an opportunity to create some space and get behind cover in that moment, as opposed to get pulled in. But
that's a good point.
On the flip side,
I'm supposed to say that, Sean. That's my shtick.
But you. And this is the one. So I'm thinking it because I'm like, I don't want to be out there in the middle of no man's land getting in a gunfight. As opposed to having there's nothing to trip over to get there. So, in that moment, that's one thing to consider. On the flip side, the level of aggression and violence that this suspect has exhibited up to that point might make that impractical to do. Because he's tried to carjack multiple people. He's running through neighborhoods. You're getting tons of 911 calls. So even in what seems like a, unoccupied industrial yard, you don't want him, you don't want to lose sight on him in a building or anything like that. So that's what they're balancing.
Yeah, and they're moving up and they make contact and it's difficult to disengage. But I do like your train of thought. If it is possible to pull back, get rifle coverage, then absolutely. But
you like your train of thought.
Yeah, that's my train. It's my train of thought.
100 comments today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
That's perfectly cool.
Like, follow, subscribe.
Absolutely.
Do all those things on Twitter.
A big thing is if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. That's a huge help in getting this out to more people. With Twitter or Periscope, we get a big chunk of our viewers are on Periscope. Thank you, Periscope people. Please hit the hearts. The algorithm loves that. And the goal is we don't get paid to do this or anything like that. We're just trying to get more people to see this because we think it's useful. And if you think it's useful, please help us out. And then the same thing on Facebook. If you're on the Facebook app, please hit us up. And Twitch, same thing. We really appreciate all you guys coming in and hanging out with us. And I got another Russian video. So let's roll that here.
Back to Russia.
Okay, and it's a fight between a Russian cop and a citizen is what I've got. Okay, obviously I don't speak Russian. This looks like a little procedural justice here. They're having a conversation. The officer's explaining what's happening.
Cops are there?
I don't know. We got a lot. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I see a lot of bear hats.
I do. Yeah, the cop on the left does look huge. Okay.
I don't speak. I show up in spandex. Suspects. They arrest themselves.
I guess so. I guess this is the cop and this is the guy I was talking to him. So it looks like they're just gonna settle this Siberian style. I guess. I don't know. Slade, are you still on here? Is this authorized in the Russian police policy guide books? I don't know. Okay. Well, it's a bad sign when this guy starts off by throwing a nice leg kick. That's a bad sign for the officer.
Wait, pause it. Oh, too late. I was gonna say, who's your money on?
My money's on the little guy. Just the way he's moving.
Little guy?
Yeah, the way he's moving.
All right, one for the little guy. I'm going for the cop. Everybody, real quick. We're gonna pause it for 15 seconds. Type in little guy or cop in terms of who you're thinking is the favorite in this one right now.
Yeah,
We're gonna let it
chime
roll.
in. The cop is the big guy. The little guy is the civilian, and I'm going with the little guy just because the way he's moving, like he's moving in and out. He's managing distance just like in the shootings, and he threw a nice little leg kick. I just think that I think he's an MMA fighter. And Slade is saying that you can fight as long as you remove your weapons and your uniform.
Counting Texas Mom. Oh, we're tied 3-3. Nevada Gal, Texas Mom. It is 3-3. It is dead even right now.
All right, so
we got little guy cop. Oh, it's 50-50. Big guy, I guess that's cop. Oh, I think it's still 50-50.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna close this
Caught
poll
by a
in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's almost a 50-50.
Let's just call it 50-50.
Maybe little guy by
it's odds, evens odds. We get the big guy versus the little agile guy.
Lady Aspen, this is Russia.
Oh. Little guy, I wouldn't dirty box this big guy. If I was him, the dirty boxing seems like a bad idea for the little guy. Oh, he caught him with a left hook. And then he goes to the ground and pound. It's over. Someone needs to step in.
Oh, man, it's done.
Oh, now the police are moving in to break it up. And they don't kick the guy's ass.
It's done. We're giving it to little. Yes, little guy lost in the end.
But they didn't kick his ass. Like, did they? I don't think so. Did you? It looked like they just sort of pulled him off, right?
Then again, the camera's down
Yeah,
right now. So,
that's true. Well, I think if the officer goes out there and they have a fair fight, you can't go kick his ass after he beats the cop, right?
No, but you can arrest him for felony assault.
Well, not in Russia if it's a fair.
Wait, you're a Russian cop now? Come on.
I'm saying that if the officer challenges the guy to a fight and the guy agrees to the fight, or the guy they challenge a fight and they take off their uniform and they go out there, you think a prosecutor is going to file charges against the guy in the United States?
I'm disagreeing with your premise that the officer challenged the guy.
The other guy challenged the officer.
That being said, where you got to ultimately is who knows what the prosecutors
the
prosecutors going on vacation to Aruba and saying fuck all this. That's what that prosecutor.
There was a case in our agency where a guy at a Walmart got into a shit talking dispute with a guy at a Walmart who'd been shoplifting. The guy they got into a mutual combat. The officer took off his duty belt and they got into fisticuffs. The guy ended up kicking the officer's ass. No charges got filed against him because the officer, agreed to the fight.
Maybe you book them and then you just don't show up in court.
I guess. I don't know. I think if the officer wants to throw down, then it's a fair fight. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being old school here. I don't know.
You're saying agrees to throw down.
Yeah. So
not one.
Right. So if the officer's like, if the guy's like, yeah, you want to fight, and the officer's like, okay, and takes off his shit and is like, all right, let's fight. Then even if, as an officer, if you're gonna engage in the fight, you're not. It's not like the guy sucker punched you or just assaulted you, right? I don't know. I think it's unprofessional to fight.
Well, if you're a Chechen and the cop offends your honor, according to Slade, it's time to get down. See, this is an educational experience for everybody. We're crossing cultural boundaries, not only covering law enforcement in the United States, but internationally.
It's an international show. I think that we're like highbrow for doing this, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you find this international content edifying, please subscribe. All right, we got the next one. That was a badass video. I need to come up with like a little poll app so we can do polls from now on. All right, so we got a fleeing suspect points a gun at a woman and holds her hostage. All right, that's not good.
9,000-year-old.
Get on the ground.
That's awesome, Slade. If I go to Chechnya, I want to go in Slade's there, and he can like show me around and keep me from getting strangled by some bear wrestling Chechens.
Drop it!
I want to go with Habib. I think I'd be safe with Habib.
413. Stop pointing at me!
All right, so he's saying stop pointing it at me. Whoa,
Get
that's
down!
cranked off around.
Get down! Get down on the fucking ground! 2 DP-50 shots fired.
If 2 people in the U.S. agree to throw down and 50 and 50 are called, I know in Washington State, police officers will quite often allow people to engage in fair fights. So if like 2 guys want to fight, the cop will back to sort of like make sure no one gets killed, but it's up to them if they want to fight. seems crazy to me. But I think in most states it's like a disorderly conduct, and the police are not allowed. Whoa, that escalated quickly.
Pause that one for a second. Finish that, because that's a good question to unpack. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who have that similar question, right? So, some sort of, two people mutually agreeing to get into a fist fight. If the police show up, what happens?
Depends where you live. I would say.
Depends where you live. If you live in a state where there's some sort of mutual combat law that allows for it, then nothing. Police will probably watch you. That's assuming it doesn't transition from simple assault to aggravated assault, right? Which anybody, it's funny, who talks about this a lot? Joe Rogan. On like his podcasts, like he'll frequently say, like, you're dumb if you get in a fist fight in public because A, you have no idea who you're screwing around with. B, the fluke where you get knocked out on a clean shot in a fist fight and you slam your head into a curb and now it's a cranial injury that's life threatening. Happens all the time, so why bother?
You crack someone and they fall down and crack their head open and get brain damage.
That's what,
It's totally risky. It's crazy. I think it's crazy that states would still in 2020 allow officers to let people fight. I think it's a bad idea. But so what do you think? What's our answer then? It depends.
Well, it depends on the jurisdiction. It also depends on the two people. So if you show up to a crime and there's not some sort of aggravating circumstance, like it's boyfriend and girlfriend, husband and wife, boyfriend and boyfriend, take your pick, then if they both sit there and say, yes, we got in a fight, XYZ happened, I don't want to press charges, party two says, I don't want to press charges, then everybody pretty much just goes on their way. So, but that's what needs to happen at the end. And there's a million things that could go wrong in the meantime before you get to that. So mutual combat ends in death. That's manslaughter. So that's the risk of it and that's kind of what Tom and I were just alluding to, right? So if you negligently commit an act that leads to some fatality, then that's manslaughter in most states. So, and that's just cut and dry the complications that, go into that assessment in like a legal case or, complicated, but that's essentially what you get to. And that's the risk in sitting there and saying, if you're 14 and you're squaring off in like a schoolyard, that's one thing, right? But like when you're a grown man and you're 180, 220 pounds, you start hitting people in the face with a closed fist, like bad things happen. And it's probably not worth it. So
I'm 240 pounds. If I punch someone and I catch them on the button, like you could kill somebody. I think Slade just summed it up where he said it should be up to the jurisdiction. And just basically said, God willing, that the participants will fight on the grass, find grass to fight on.
Yes, which is why we have municipal parks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we I just read the description on this one when we were chatting. It cuts forward. Basically, this guy was observed with the gun. In the trailer park, they wanted him for a crime. They saw him for arson. So he had been lighting shit on fire in the trailer park. They contacted him. He's got a gun. He pointed a gun at the officer. One round was fired. The officer backed off, and then they sort of trailed him to this trailer park. He goes into the trailer, and they contact his mother, and the mother's saying he's armed with a gun, and he's trying to set stuff on fire. So now the officers roll in with a SWAT team, and they do a crisis entry because this guy's got his mother in there at gunpoint and is trying to set the trailer on fire per the victim. So normally I would say, well, you don't go storming into a trailer, but if you have a victim inside of it whose life is at risk, then that creates an exigency.
Let me touch on one thing before we hit play on this. So, like, it's very common for people to get upset by suspects getting shot in the back. In this moment where you've got a twice violent fleeing felon, you could probably make a very sound legal argument that the officer should have shot him before he was able to get to a structure and create a hostage situation. And he would have been completely legally justified, both in the eyes of most state laws, but also Supreme Court precedent. to take that action on because of exactly this.
Right.
You now have a barricade. You've got a serial arsonist or an arsonist who is putting other lives at threat. And now to get him out of it, it's a more complicated tactical situation to try to unwind a barricade with an arsonist as opposed to an arsonist running across a field pointing a gun.
Right.
At you.
Yeah. If someone's running in front of you and you're a police officer and they turn around and point a gun at you, then they're engaging me in a gunfight. And if I just stop and let them go and don't shoot them, so like I could stop, plant, and deliver a couple rounds and shoot the person in the back, which is going to look bad or whatever. But by letting them get away and barricading inside of this house, like you said, they've put the mother at risk. Also, the officers that are now having to go into an unknown space with an armed suspect. It really is one of those situations where I would agree with Sean. Like, I like to think, I don't know what I would have done, but I like to think I would have shot the man and not just let him run away. But I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Shelby, great question. Let's circle up on that at the end of the video because people come here to hear the videos as much as Tom and I opine.
Yeah, we'll get to it right after this one.
But we're going to circle back, so hang around for a couple minutes.
Get on the ground! 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 Go! Get up! Get up! Get up! You good?
All right, so there's the picture, the handgun in his hand. There's a gun. And in this kind of a situation, this is just my thoughts on this. If I'm going into that space and I know that there's a man with a gun who's already pointed at officers and is trying to set the place on fire, that's what I've been told, and there's a woman being held hostage in there, and when I go in through that door, if that person's holding a gun, they don't need to point it at me. Like, just them not dropping the gun and laying down on the ground, like, sorry, like, you don't get to point the gun at me, like, because it only takes a split second. We fired the round through the window. We've announced that we're coming in. We kicked in the door. You can lay down on the ground and put your hands out to the side. I'm not going to get shot. I'm not going to let you shoot the victim. If you're standing there with a gun, you're going to get shot. That's just kind of the way I look at it. What do you think, Sean?
Do you need to visually verify that it is a gun? Does that change it? Right. In this case, we were able to see it in the video, right? But a lot of instances we see, it seems like it's a gun, but it turns out to be a wallet.
If the officer thinks, if you think the guy has a gun in his hand, and you could be wrong. Like I know somebody who shot somebody who had a wallet in their hand by mistake. Someone I worked with, they didn't shoot the person because they made that up. Like they thought that person, they had been in a long fight and a struggle with this person. They'd been in a fist fight out on the deck. It stumbled into the house. They're rolling around. The guy was out of his mind on meth. He dove into the closet to get his wallet. Who knows what he was thinking? And he came out and pointed the wallet at the officer, and the officer thought it was a gun and shot him. It doesn't matter that it wasn't a gun. It's what the culpable mental state of the officer, what a reasonable officer would have thought given the totality of the circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. So what we can't do is say, well, it wasn't a gun. What we need to say is if a reasonable officer had been there, they see a black object in the hand, they think it's a gun, here's all that's happened, is it reasonable to shoot this person? Is it a necessary use of force? And I would argue that it is. You got any thoughts on it?
In this instance, I completely agree. I just kind of was setting it up to unpack. The one thing I would say is, I think there are, if you're dealing with prior information that this is a violent, armed individual, there's a difference there between that and the instance where somebody shows up to XYZ call and it's not a violent call, it's a check welfare, and they shoot somebody with a wallet. Right. So in those instances, I think we have a responsibility to verify that it's a firearm before you get there, because there's not that prior information. But in this case, all of those facts line up to your point. So like, you don't necessarily even need to get there in this instance, right? Like he could have had a gun in the field, dropped that had a wallet when they came inside on the crisis entry, and probably would have been justified, and legal to shoot him at that moment.
Right.
So I'm just trying to kind of play around with like some of the scenarios that we see and how the nuance matters and all these things.
Right.
So
what about our question about the Bearcat, about the up armored vehicles being used by police? You want to go with that first?
Let's see if there's anything left here on the video, and then we'll jump on that at the end.
All right, so we got the gun here. All right, that's it on that one.
All right. Bearcats and vehicles, right? So let's see, where was that thread? So local PD, town 6,000. I think it's fair to is it a fact at this point that the U.S. Army purchased a lot of armored equipment and that's made its way out to local police departments across the country? I mean, there's not too much to disagree with there.
No.
Yeah, I think when I think about this issue, I look at it two ways. I look at the optics of it, which I see how we have some of these conversations. And then I look at like the cultural trend, right? And like there plenty of people may disagree with me on this, but we probably go out of our way to save bad guys more so than we did.
Oh, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. It's definitely improved.
Over 20, 30 years, 40 years, like we as a society do that. And the other side of that coin in my mind is we are probably less willing to put law enforcement's life at risk. So Bearcats and armored vehicles, even though they start looking like an occupying army, to me, it's all part of that continuum of, I mean, departments, your average municipality is cash strapped. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars training officers. If they're SWAT officers, even more. And if you have a judicious and prudent use of these vehicles, they can lead to the protection of life.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, they're also more dangerous and they can lead to excessive loss of life if somebody who's deploying them doesn't do that. The optics are different in my mind than that.
That's what I would say too. Yeah, I look at it. I agree with you. I see this equipment, and I see the utility of it. So I'm a big proponent of barricades. I think we can save a lot of lives by effectively managing barricades and doing more barricades. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And I would also argue that during a barricade, having an armored vehicle like this provides you an advantage and gives you tools that make it more likely, if used properly, that you can preserve life. So I think it has a utility. I think it has a role in policing. The optics thing is the problem because, like you said, it's an optics thing. And I think that departments have made a lot of mistakes by rolling them out in situations where they probably shouldn't. One big thing for me is when marketing opportunities for police departments. So when they're going to community events and they're going out to engage with the public, a lot of departments will roll out their up armored vehicles, because it's cool, right? But
that's the only reason I would bring that kid.
I know, and the kids get to sit in it, and it's fun and all that type of thing. But I think that's a poor use of it. I think it's something that should be kept out of public sight. When there's a need for the tool, utilize the tool. But I think they're overly employed. I think we probably agree on this one.
Yeah, no, we're kind of talking around the same consensus here. Shelby, to your point, Bearcat, that's just a brand. So. Is there a difference between a tank and a Bearcat?
There's a difference,
but not in terms of how
citizens see it.
How a layman and a citizen uses it. It's still an armored vehicle, so I get that. Screams escalating, 10-person protest. That to me is probably interesting to pull on the threads a little bit. If it's truly a protest, I guess my 2 cents is I would be very judicious and cautious about how I use that at a protest and or riot, because the optics of it once again. That being said, is there a situation where it's probably prudent to have, especially given what we're seeing at certain protests / riots? Yeah.
There could be instances where it's a valid tool. You should. I like having departments have some kind of tool like that available. I like what Slade just said about maybe what I would really like to see is to have the capacity packaged, even though it's propaganda, like it's just optics, but trying to package some of these up armor things, like he said, up armoring an ambulance, up armoring some.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Well, because you're thinking of it as a show of force option.
No.
What do you think?
Where I start in modern day policing, where I start getting really queasy, is when we're not blatant about who's showing up, right? Because I mean, take the Portland Federal Police thing. Oh, they're driving around in rented unmarked vehicles, right? There's something that we as Americans see that, and it automatically makes us think, secret state police bad,
right?
And unmarked ambulance, while I appreciate the tactical benefit of being in an armored ambulance and the surreptitious nature to it, I almost think that, especially given the distrust, unfortunately, that we have in institutions, like, we need them to be very clear about what they are. So I would almost rather that, because the flip side is, like, trust right now in most public institutions is at lows, and that just adds to it, so like totally I'd rather
so good police markings. I think he was kind of getting at as like less intimidating, but I don't know, it's my stance is that I think that there's a value for them, and they can be a valuable tool, but it's something that I don't like seeing out there because it does send a terrible signal to the population. Anyway.
Yeah. All right,
let's go to the next one. And I'm going to get to someone asked about the Waco thing. Let's get to that between the videos.
What happened?
So, just someone just asked if what we thought about Waco. And
we should do a spin-off on that.
Off Waco?
Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Giselle.
I think it's a relevant topic. I think American law enforcement learned a lot from Waco.
Officer of Media Relations Division of the Los Angeles Police Department.
She does not seem excited
about
this job.
Is intended to provide you with information about an officer-involved shooting that occurred in 77th Division in the city of Los Angeles on November 25th, 2018.
Oh yeah, that division.
You are about to see relevant video footage
she
and
looks
learn
really
about other evidence and
about
police procedures related to the case, so you can have a better understanding of what occurred based on what we know right now. The LAPD conducts very thorough use of force investigations,
I think it offends people's sensibilities, the idea that the government, I think the government made a lot of mistakes.
View numerous hours of video footage,
I shouldn't talk about it because I don't know a lot about it.
Amount of forensic
but I mean,
but they're guilty.
I've read a few stories about it, about what happened, and I think it was one of those instances where politics got involved with decision making, and people didn't think things through, and they got to a point where they were kind of like they got into something and they didn't back out when they had a chance, and the munitions they used, and
until all the facts are known and the investigation is
tough.
complete.
I probably shouldn't go down that hole because I'm going to say something inappropriate or wrong.
The images and information you're about to see may be disturbing. When a police officer uses force to arrest a suspect or defend against an attack,
like, doesn't that go without saying that you're going to show relevant video?
In addition, there may be strong language used by those shown in the video.
Strong language.
Viewers on November onto the 100 block of 2018 at around 9:21 p.m.
Oh, I wonder why this one took so long.
Metropolitan Division officers
There's an HBO special. How about this? How about I watch the HBO special and then we talk about it next week?
The 100 block of West 85th Street when they saw two men.
Jocko Willing did that. Like, you looked at all these like Navy SEAL movies and then like commentated on them for GQ.
Good idea. Davon George had a gun in his right hand, and they stopped their unmarked patrol vehicle with their service weapons drawn.
Okay.
George began running away on the sidewalk with a gun in his hand. According to the officer's statements,
I'm going to watch the Waco thing and then comment on it next week.
He pointed the gun
I'm going to do a
in
little
the
reading too.
Direction.
So I'm not
and that's when the
talking out of my
officer-involved
ass.
shooting occurred. The driver officer fired once, and George was not struck. George continued to run. He attempted to climb a fence when one of the officers grabbed his arm. Officers deployed a taser several times in attempts
I
to
kind of
take
like the
George into
idea of
custody.
telling what's going to
About
happen
4
ahead of
minutes
time,
later,
because then you're
backup
priming the
arrived,
viewer.
and George
if you're
was taken
trying
into
to
custody
if
without
you're trying
any
to
further
conduct,
use of force.
like if you're approaching
now-
this, so if you're approaching it from the police's perspective, you're trying to like disseminate information, be transparent, but also not alienate the population. So I think like explaining, hey, this is what you're going to see, this is why they do what they do, before as opposed to after the video, because people might not get to the description at the end, like, you know, so putting it up front, you're like sort of justifying it ahead of time, I think makes a lot of sense. I don't know.
I think we see it in different forms on a lot of these, you know, critical incident briefs, but like I like it when you're doing it in snippets, right? Tell me what I'm going to see according to you and how you believe I should interpret it, and then show me something. Like I just totally zoned her out. Maybe I got ADD and whatnot.
Hey, you're not alone. That's
like,
America, man. Right?
You know, it's just like nothing about that got me engaged to want to listen. And I'm probably better than your average 18-year-old who is really who you want to look at these and try to process what's going on, not just get the information off of, you know, wherever. Anyway.
Is video from the officer's body-worn cameras.
Right.
These are cameras worn.
Info.
Did you know there's a new taser out?
A new taser? No.
Yeah.
What does it do?
It's like the X7. You can like jump between cartridges by flicking.
Oh, really? Sweet.
Is it though?
Yeah. Do we want them using more
like
tasers?
when you're asked up and you're like, new cartridge. Like, it kind of concerned me. Like, I feel like taser's been too successful if that's the case, because they're just coming up with these unnecessarily, like, you know, unnecessary complications.
All right.
So no audio yet. Foot pursuit.
All right, we got a foot
nighttime.
pursuit. He had a gun out. I think he saw a gun. He's got a gun out. The officer had a gun out. Oh, now he's going over the fence. He grabs him. And a lot of times it takes 30 seconds for the audio. Okay, now he looks compliant. Or at least he's not running away anymore.
He got it? No, I don't have no gun. I'm gonna tase you. I ain't got no gun, man. Get down.
I don't know why they tased him. Do you know why they tased him?
Sounds like there was some confusion over the gun and if he chucked it or not.
Shots fired. We just had a tase. Give me an RA. You got our location? Hey, I'm on up. Hello? Man, I tased, man. They tased me, shot you? West of Avalon. I mean, he shot you, baby. Wow. He shot you?
He's giving him another ride.
Hey, face the fence. Face the fence. Face the fence. Okay, we have two. We have the.
He's reaching
Give
around.
the don't pull out the tasers! What the fuck was this, man? Y'all stop tasing me, man. I'm good. Hey, back up. Back up. You got our help call. We're trying to secure the weapon. Good. You good, baby?
Yeah, I don't know why they tased that guy.
Well, he's a suspect, right? So you got a violent fleeing felon.
Well, he wasn't fleeing. He wasn't fleeing when I saw it. It looked like he was compliant at that point. He was standing there with his hands off to the side, and I heard the officer say, tase him, and the officer was like, what? And he said, tase him. And he tased him. I'm not saying that there was no reason to tase him. Yeah. I see that, and I'm like, what the hell did you tase him for? Why not just grab him by the arm and put him in handcuffs?
Verify, I got supervisors responding.
Like, I would put that guy in handcuffs. Wouldn't you put him in handcuffs?
It's dark as heck there. You could hear two people off camera. So you got two officers, and it sounds like there's two people off in the dark who are probably distracting you.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there's a weapon around. So like you got a lot of divided
I know you got a lot of divided attention, but if I have a person who points a gun at me and then ditches the gun, and then I catch them, I want to get them in handcuffs. I don't know.
We're on Main west of the liquor store.
I'm just saying I need an explanation from this, and I don't think I'm going to see it in the video. If I were a supervisor, and I saw this, I'd be like, why'd you tase this guy?
What's this address? Main Broadway. We don't have a problem.
And I mean, here's the thing, right? Like I see two paths from this, right? I see a path where you and I agree, and maybe they should have gone hands-on and not tased.
Well, if he's got his hands out to the side and he's compliant, then you can't tase him. If a person runs from you and then they stop and they put their hands out to the side,
secure the weapon.
and they're
Just
doing
give it
what
a
you
little
tell them,
distance. Let's secure the weapon. Go down.
if they're doing what you tell them, you can't just tase them. There has to be a reason to tase somebody.
Don't move. Don't move.
Yeah, if he's fully compliant, it's tough for me to like. I didn't see it in the video.
I don't know if he was totally compliant.
If somebody's fully compliant, if somebody was fully compliant,
and he may not have been. He may not have been something I didn't see, but it looked like he was pretty compliant to me. I don't know. I would want an explanation for this.
Yeah, or more
information. Well, and I mean, it's incumbent upon you to justify your use of force. And it's a taser, it's not the end of the world. And even if it was unjustified, under the duress, I can understand you get freaked out and you tase somebody and you shouldn't have. Like if the officer was like, hey boss, I fucked up, I shouldn't have tased that guy. He pointed a gun at me and then I was like, I didn't know what to do when I tased him, and now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't have. Like, I would be okay with that. You know what I mean? But if it's anyway, it's complicated.
See, one thing worth unpacking here, right, is I wonder if in the age where everything's on camera, if the optics of the taser versus the optics of going hands-on and what that includes makes it so officers are erring towards tasers.
Could very well be.
Which admittedly is a higher use of force, right? But like, you think about how that gets handled, right? In an age where the taser isn't as let's just as widespread and popular as it may currently be, and like you're sweeping that dude, you're slamming him on the ground, you're getting him in cuffs as quickly as you possibly can, and like there's going to be some scrapes and some blows in the process there. And I wonder if the current environment, it's almost like, based off department policy, I can articulate this, or whatever the statute is, and the optics of me tasing him, which it almost has like this scientific air to it, right?
It's
like
sanitized,
in a weird way. It does.
It is. It's definitely sanitizes
right?
violence, and I think that's why a lot of police officers are reliant on tasers. Let's see this here. Let's see if he's compliant or not. He looked pretty compliant to me, and if you're compliant, then the cops can't just tase you. But I don't know. He could have been reaching in his waistband. He could have been anything, and I didn't see it. Let's see if we see here. And it could be something that it doesn't catch on the camera. So we got this guy here. He's standing there.
So he had a weapon. Do we see that he doesn't have the weapon? I know his hands, tough.
His hands are empty.
Okay.
His hands were off to the side, and the officer's got him by one arm. Now he's got his hand right there. I don't know.
So he's already tased at that point, right?
There he was. But a second ago, he was being walked over by the officer.
I don't know that I would agree with you on the a lot of cops getting accused of abuse because they're abusing the public.
I think there's plenty of, well, if you have a country of 380 million people, is it now? And we have 18,000 police departments. On any given night, there's going to be a police officer abusing their authority. It's just a matter of numbers. So, what
I agree. I look at.
I don't know. Depends on what you consider.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's a lot of videos because we're video recording it now. And I think there's tons of evidence to suggest that police are far less violent now than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Well, nominal numbers or proportions, right? So if, let's just say hypothetically you got a country, I think it's about 330 million plus or minus, 330 million people, and X percentage of the people are going to get into a violent incident once a year, right? Whatever that, however you want to dice that. And what percentage of those people act prudently given the circumstances, and then compare that to cops. And, they're facing many are facing violent situations on a nightly basis.
Yeah,
so
use of force is extremely rare. It's extremely rare for officers to use force. But it's not rare because we have so many cops. So like you said, it's rare. Like as a proportion of police contacts, it's very exceedingly rare. But we live in a large enough country and we record enough of it that it's represented as being a much greater problem than it is in terms of actual numbers. But it doesn't really matter because it has the negative effect regardless of how many it actually is.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of the developed nations, comparison, right? Because
we're not a developed nation, we're a shithole country.
I disagree with you.
Well, I mean, by the numbers we are. I mean, by the standard of living, life expectancy, all the key markers, infant mortality, all those things, we're like one of the worst in terms of post-industrial societies, Western developed societies. We perform one of the worst countries. Anyway.
All right, Tom and I are not going to go into that, but what I will say is I would be skeptical of it because we're a much different society than most. I mean, like, for some reason, this is a random anecdote, right? But like, I lived in Argentina for a summer, right? And I had a friend, he had a really nice digital camera walking around like the capital district in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And two officers came up to him and they were like, "Oh, you were taking pictures of that shop window while it's closed." And he was like, "No, I was taking pictures of my girlfriend. Like, we're excited to be here, basically." They're like, "Oh, well, we're gonna have to arrest you because there's a law that says you can't photograph. Like, basically, you were casing this business." And they shook that dude down on the street for $500 digital camera.
Oh yeah.
Like, the quote unquote Paris of the South. And this is just an anecdote. This isn't doing from every officer. Yeah, that's a cop in Buenos Aires, but like, I'm always skeptical because there's a lot of things that make America unique, right or wrong. And in terms of living standards for working people in the United States, not comparing to Argentina, but comparing us to other Western countries like the European countries, especially Scandinavian countries, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, on all the major markers for like performance of standard of living for people, we do really poorly. Like for education, life expectancy, infant mortality, all the major indicators, suicide. Some of Scandinavian countries might do a little worse, but I don't actually think that's true anymore. Anyway, I think America is unique, and I think it's unique in a lot of ways because it's extremely violent, heavily armed, and has a history of state violence and vigilante violence. Let's go back. So this is the same thing. I want to see the original tasing real quick, and then we'll go on to the next one. All right. So here they walk up on him and pull him off the fence. Right now, they think he's armed. I don't know if he was armed or not, but they think he's armed and jumping the fence. I'm good with them. Right here, I'm good with them yanking him off the fence, slamming him on the ground, and put him in handcuffs. That's what I would do. I would gain a dominant. Right now, I'd get his hands behind his back and put him in handcuffs. Hands right there. He's saying, "I'm not doing anything," and he has both of his hands out to the side.
You got it?
Tase him.
Get down.
All right, I have a lot of problems with this so far. I would need a really good explanation for this. Hands up.
Didn't the PIO say he was fleeing with a gun, and that's why they got out guns drawn?
Yeah.
So he had a gun at one point, from what we know.
Right.
But he's saying, "I don't have a gun," which he may not at that moment, right? But like,
he may still have a gun.
It's just he may. Like, we don't know where it went, but if we take him at face word, at face value rather, he had it when they got out of the car. So
so say
this is a tough one. I can see it going.
So say the guy has a gun in his waistband, right? And he's running from the police. He's still armed, but then he puts his hands out to the side and says, "I don't have a gun, man." And he has his hands out to the side, and an officer has one hand on his wrist. You handcuff him. You don't tase him. Like there's no legitimate reason to tase somebody if they're compliant and they're not actively resisting your attempts to take them into custody.
in that scenario, he's got a taser. I'm sorry, he's got a handgun stowed
Yeah,
somewhere.
so he's got a handgun in his waistband, but he's put his hands
out.
out to the side and he's compliant with you. You can't just tase him. Like there's no legitimate reason for tasing him. It doesn't improve it doesn't provide you any benefits that I can see. And I can't think of any policy that I've ever read, like a use of force policy, that an agency would justify use of force in that situation of deploying a taser. I can't think of any. I mean, if a guy's compliant and doing as you tell him and has his hands out to the side, you can't tase him. I mean, they would need to provide additional information that makes what I just said not the case. Like, it can't be that he just has his hands out to the side and compliant and you decide to tase him. That would be illegal. That would be no bueno. I mean, am I missing something?
I can think of circumstances, and there's a lot to me that's left out of it. But you and I, without more information, aren't going to get any closer to consensus on it. But I hear what you're saying. You have to say
right now that the burden is on these officers to justify, like, have a pretty good explanation for why they tased him. No, it's always incumbent upon officers to explain their use of force. Correct?
Always. Like, to me, if the narrative was violent fleeing felon. Don't know where he's going. Don't know where the gun is. I saw him with a gun initially, and it comes down to me getting into, some sort of physical fight with him and getting closer as opposed to closing. As opposed to keeping some sort of distance and trying to get him in custody. Like, totally. Yeah. Depending on the department policy and so forth, I could see that. And
no problem.
That may be not the case in this instance. It's too dark and it's too dynamic for me to say one way or another, but
I'm totally good with that. And the guy's trying to climb that fence, tase him. If I don't, he's running away with a gun, whatever, you got PC, boom, go ahead, tase him. I don't care. But when someone puts up their hands to the side and they surrender and they're compliant, no bueno. But it could be shit I didn't see there. I don't know. There could be more to the story. There could be additional information.
Rubenstein, the public information.
They're going to have to write a long report on that one, though.
This critical incident community briefing is intended to provide you with information about an officer-involved shooting that occurred in the Newton Division in the city of Los Angeles on August 7th, 2018.
All right.
You're about to see relevant video footage and learn of other evidence and police procedures, so you can have of this investigation.
I'm going to skip through the preamble.
Especially for young
Hamilton of the Force Investigation Group of the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm going to give you a brief overview of an incident.
He seems like the kind of guy I'd like to have a beer with.
2018 at around 11 a.m. LAPD officers and agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned to the FBI Fugitive Task Force were attempting to arrest a wanted murder suspect at 4074 South Central Avenue. The suspect armed himself and shot at the officers and agents, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. The suspect they were looking for was Daniel Valdez. He was wanted for a murder that occurred in the city of Los Angeles on July 31st, 2018.
1934.
You will see closed-circuit television from the lobby of the hotel where the suspect was staying.
Dude's old.
He is old.
Around murder people when you're adult.
34, so 70. He's 86 years old.
The murder warrant.
I picked a random number. I don't know.
With a handgun,
I'm just saying that dude's old.
The officers and agents
should be doing other things. Collect Social Security.
The FBI agent was struck and the suspect sustained a gunshot wound to his left wrist. All right, so this is our guy. Looks like a receptionist office for something. I don't know. Did they say what the business was, Sean? I missed it.
Looks like a motel or possibly a check cashing.
Yeah, I would say.
There's a signature pad there. Odd behavior for...
Look at his fiddling around in his waistband. He just pulled, there's a magazine, and there he's got a gun in his hand. Suspect definitely holding a gun. So that's weird. That looks like a magazine, but that looks like a revolver, no?
It could be a glasses case.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a leg of a glasses, some glasses. And
yeah, I think that's glasses.
He dropped his readers and pulled out his six-shooter. If you need readers and you're carrying a six-shooter, it's probably not a good way to start that chain.
My money's not on the guy with the six-shooter.
Yeah.
The octogenarian with the six-shooter. Oh, whoa. That happened very quickly. Okay.
Is it okay to still make "that's what she said" jokes, or are those frowned upon?
I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
As
Still.
long as you say a "that's what he said" joke every once in a while too, or and then throw in a "that's what they said" joke every once in a while, just to be completely PC, and you'll be good to go. That's what they said. I don't know.
Definitely put glasses on before you shoot, if you need glasses.
Yeah, I don't know what that guy
You will now see
was thinking.
closed-circuit television from the parking area.
I mean, he
of the
went out there
hotel.
to engage the police. So we got the officers. So this is the door where this guy is in, I'm assuming, and that's the window that he was like sort of looking out when he was fidgeting around his waistband. And this looks like unmarked police officers walking up. So they're like in a little stack. They know he's in here. They're walking along the side of the building. They hold there. And they're right next to each other. Like this guy's right there.
He must have saw him stacking.
I think so.
Because then he pops out,
yeah,
right?
I think he saw them stacking on that window. I don't know if I could see some movement inside of the office or not. I don't see any movement. They haven't passed that window yet, it doesn't look like, but I think he would be able to see them.
Yeah,
It looked like he looked at the window, right?
He turned towards it, and like he looked like he was kind of peeking out, like, you know, typical suspicious, guilty conscious behavior. And then he started moving quick, jumped out, pretty much ready to shoot as soon as he saw whatever it was he saw.
Okay, door. Here comes the door. Or he comes out. Whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
That's a heavy move right there. So he came out of that door and right away comes around the corner pointing at the officers, yeah?
So this is interesting, right? Can we go back to that first? So seeing how that plays out, go back to when he's looking out of the window, if you can. All right, so this view, right? So he starts peering out of that window on the top of the screen. And now, tactically, this is a challenging spot to try to approach somebody, right? So he sees you in the upper left side of that window. You've got more material than you might otherwise have. He's looking down, so maybe he sees him, maybe he doesn't, right? But now you're trying to engage that suspect who draws on you pretty quick through the material on the left side of the window and the right side of the window and the door. So you're really in a pretty bad spot because he's got 2 pieces of wall and a couple pieces of glass in between you and him. But if he comes around that door, which he is exactly what he tries to do, pretty damn quick at that, and now you've got zero cover, and he's still hiding behind that hard corner, which is a bunch of 2x4s and stucco and cement board and whatever else. So not that that's a lot necessarily with, you know, modern weapons, but that's, if I could take a pick between being in a carport and being behind that, I would take the suspect position.
For sure.
And the guy's committed, right? Like, he moves so fast, he drops his readers, and boom, he's at it. You know, so
he looks, and it looks like he's looking out, and let's see if he just saw them. Yeah, he sees them, and then he reaches in his pocket, pulls out his gun, and he's like, all right, let's get to business.
That is a committed felon right there.
As a homicide suspect all right, so then we got these guys stacking. All right, we got the exit here. He comes out straight to the gun, and then he meets a hail of bullets. And I like these guys. They fan out. That's good. Like, they fan out.
Moving.
Stay moving. This guy transitions to his handgun.
Transitions.
This guy's up on the pistol, still cranks off a couple rounds.
Good
neutralizing spacing.
Mop bucket's okay. I think the mop bucket is because that's probably the maintenance room over there. This looks like a motel.
Yeah, it looks definitely.
The mop bucket was not involved in this.
No, and there's no holes in the mop bucket, so that's good. I shouldn't be joking about it, but it's pretty funny. All right. Then they move up on him.
I bring it out of you.
They move up on him. He took like a shotgun blast and like 7 or 8 rounds at close range, so I'm pretty sure this guy's not gonna be walking around anytime soon. And I think that's just one of those situations where these officers had a shitty option on how they could approach this guy, and based on his behavior, there was like, he's a dangerous man. Obviously, he already killed somebody, and that's him. He's fall down. We don't really get a view here.
I would almost compare this to the last video, right? Like, I think they were both violent suspects, right?
One FBI agent fired 7 shots, and 2
when we were
LAPD
talking about
officers fired a total of 15 shots during the officer.
The optics of it become challenging, right? But like, what officers are responding in frequent cases to the worst case scenario, and they're trying to modulate that down, right? And they don't always get it right. But like, you don't know when the violent suspect is going to be this guy who flips on a dime and literally is engaging you, versus the guy in the prior video who maybe chucks the weapon and is playing dumb, right? And like, it's their responsibility to judge very quickly and calibrate accordingly, right? And it's challenging, especially, I mean, here you got plain daylight, you don't have a pitch black street, there wasn't really anybody else who was distracting you from responding to the suspect. You have a very enclosed environment tactically. If you just compare the two locations, you know, there's a lot of things that are different that makes this easier to respond to, even though he had the up
This
on
is
you.
way clearer. This is way clearer.
Yeah.
I think that the other one is a bad example to compare to, because I just think, like, I thought that was pretty, like, when someone puts their hands out to the side, it's a pretty clear signal.
I'm not talking about I'm talking about everything.
It's a totally different environment.
Because they're in the same point. They're at the same, when you're walking up to, when you're jumping out of that car and the dude takes off in the video prior, and you're walking up to the window and the guy's there and he sees you, your mental state as an officer is very similar.
Absolutely.
Now, what you do from there on out, 2 totally different animals, 2 totally different situations. But what I'm saying is, one is, here you need to ratchet it up really quick. And fortunately, you were in a good position to do that successfully without loss of life, barring the suspect. And then the other one, you have to ratchet down, and doing that within the operating environment is just much more challenging in the former. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I
totally agree. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, is when officers, they need to either ratchet it up or they need to ratchet it down, and they make a mistake with one of the ways, anyway.
Involved shooting.
I think that's it. Let me see here.
No, to the operated scene.
There's the handgun.
Daniel Valdez was belonging to Valdez was.
And I think Slade made a good point that it's kind of sad when you
70 years of age.
when the courtyard of the hotel is also a parking lot. That's a bad sign.
In the next several months, the LAPD will continue to investigate and analyze this incident.
Yeah, I hit the keyboard by mistake.
And
Sorry about
forensic
that.
tests and an autopsy are completed. After the investigation
What makes
is completed, the
LAPD
chief
break
of police
this
will
guy
forward
out
his
as
findings
opposed to the woman prior?
I don't know.
The captain, whatever.
I like LA just usually seems to do a better job of their production.
But like that guy, like he's straight out of Hollywood, and the other one is like, I hate my job. Why do I got to do this?
He looks like a guy you would cast as a detective, like who's like a little bit of a hard drinking detective, but he's still like the ladies dig him, and he's like James McNulty from The Wire. You know what I mean? Like that guy.
That's what I was just gonna say. You're making him a McNulty.
All right, we got another one from. Oh, before we move on. Can you guys follow us or like us or subscribe to us or do some kind of shit on whatever platform you're on to help us out? More people who do that, the more likely we are to have more people see this. I didn't say that very well.
We need like 150,000 hearts on Twitter or Periscope. So get on that. Super hearts, I think, count more.
I made this little heart graphic to inspire you guys to give hearts. So just look at those hearts and try to recreate it with your own hearts on the Periscope platform. All right, we got another one here. This is going to be LA as well. Officer involved shooting. Hollywood Division.
Until the viewers.
There he is.
Hello, I'm Captain Patricia Sandoval of Media Relations Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm going to give you a brief overview of an incident.
At least it's not the New York guy. The New York guy is the hard one to watch.
At around 9:15 a.m. Officers from Hollywood Division responded to a radio call of a battery suspect at the 24 Hour Fitness at 6380 West Sunset Boulevard. When the officers arrived,
A lot of those going out of business right now.
Imagine. I wouldn't want to own a
130 of them
identified as
closing.
Albert Ramon Dorsey.
Well, my buddy
had
owns a
battered
boxing
one of their
gym,
security
and he's in a lot
officers
of
on October
trouble right now, I
28th,
think.
2018.
He
and was
just
now
started it,
trespassing
and it was doing
in the
well,
shower
and then
area, which
coronavirus
was closed
hit,
off
and
for repairs.
he's having a rough time, I think.
What's this about possums and beehives and Walter PPKs? That makes no sense.
I don't know.
Gotta rephrase that.
I don't know. I missed the chat stream for a minute.
We were able to recover CCTV footage from Dorsey's confrontation.
Looking at that
with the
beautiful
security
Oakland
guard on the
A's
28th.
windbreaker.
All right. He's got his chonies on, it looks like. No?
Those aren't chonies.
No, he's got shorts.
Those
Those are
basketball shorts. Come on, man.
You're right.
Cool. This ain't the 1850s walking around with underwear down to your
Yeah,
kneecaps.
he's getting ready to go to the beach, and that's his swimming leotard or whatever you'd call it back then. I don't know what you'd call it.
Why are you shooting possums for? I grew up in New York City. I used to see them all the time. Their little rat tails freaked me out. I don't think they bother anybody though.
Chonies.
Da da da.
Chonies. I love that. It's a good word.
Oh.
What happened? I didn't see it.
Sounds like a possum was messing with
No, but this
Townsend's honey
look at
pot.
this guy. He decks this guy. Boom. He drops that guy. Do you see that?
Yep. Just walking away like, no day in the neighborhood.
There's a big dude. Looks like a big dude. All right, just zoomed in. Security. So it's a security guard. He knocks the security guard straight out.
Double red arrows? Like, really? Look here. It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, right? My references to cartoons fall short on, like, children of this generation.
They don't watch Bugs Bunny anymore. I don't think.
No, I made a Jetsons reference to somebody the other day who was early 20s, and they're like, I never heard of that.
I used to.
Like, really? Nope.
Mine was like Pepe Le Pew and Daffy Duck and all that. That's how old I am. We used to have Saturday morning cartoons.
This is the body-worn video.
That was the only time you could watch cartoons was on Saturday mornings. We had 3 TV channels, and only one of them came in good.
Working field duties. They are worn at chest level
is
and provide
microaggressing
perspective
like
from that angle.
Paraphrasing passive aggressiveness? Like, what's microaggression?
So like a microaggression is so say like I was a dwarf. So say I suffered from say I had dwarfism and I was like a little person, and I worked in an office, and someone in my office kept making comments about the fact that I was a little person all day, like alluding to it, reminding me of it, constantly was bringing it up as an issue, and it would just kind of grate on my nerves after a while and make it like, so it's just like an extra amount of work I need to do at work, just dealing with this person constantly reminding me that I'm different than them. And that's what you would call like, it's like a microaggression. Even if the person is not trying to be an asshole, but they're just constantly reminding you of the fact that you're a little person, and that, oh, do you need help doing this? You need blah, blah, blah. Oh, you can't do that. You know, like, even if it's well-intentioned, if it causes the person, makes them feel uncomfortable and they're at work or whatever, that's kind of like what you would call a microaggression. It's kind of how I understand it.
So it could be what we call passive aggressive.
Someone could be being, but I think passive aggressive indicates that the person is really trying to be aggressive by being passive, like that it's like there's some kind of like they're intentionally doing it, whereas with a
like if I'm not an idiot and I work with a dwarf and I make multiple comments in a day about that seem to make it obvious that I'm thinking about that person being a dwarf and maybe even insinuating that they're less than.
But I think that wouldn't be a microaggression. That would be like passive aggressive. If you're like, you're doing it, you're insinuating it on purpose. The microaggression would be like you like this person and you want to make them comfortable, but you're constantly reminding them because you feel as though you need to do all these extra things to make them comfortable, or it's on your mind because you are worried about it or you think it's a big deal, and they're just trying to go about their day and trying to get their TPS reports done, and you keep coming over and mentioning that they're a little person. So that's the reason it's called a microaggression is because you're not intentionally trying to be a dickhead. You're just being a dickhead unintentionally by making this person have to just be reminded all the time that they're different than you are.
So if I went up to him and I was like, "Hey, we fell short on this, blah 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 blah," and I just used that phrase, that would be a microaggression because it would
I don't think so. I think it would be more like there's a project and you're like, well, are you sure that you can handle that? Are you sure that it's I can do that. You don't need to do that because you think they can't reach the shelf or something. You know what I mean? Like, and they're like, no, I can reach the shelf. It's not a big deal. And you're like constantly bringing up or saying or asking them all the time about what it's like to be a little person, about this or that, and they just get sick of hearing about it, basically.
I see a lot of comments about food and fat people and saying, "Do you need to eat that?" Which, to me, is if you do it more than once, is like passive aggressive, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I think I would need to learn. I need to read up like the definitions, but I think the passive aggressive is that it's like you're conscious of that you're trying to be a dick, like you would say some snotty remark that technically isn't a snotty remark, but everyone knows it's like you're trying to be snotty. I don't know.
Is there good government money in hiring dwarfs? Is this a thing?
I have no idea what that. I don't know what they're talking about.
Townsend says there's somebody who only hires dwarfs because of government money for disabled people.
I just randomly picked some group of some identity. Like it doesn't matter.
I'm just pulling on.
I think I probably am not saying. I'm probably like offending some little person right now. I don't even know if you're supposed to say little person nowadays. I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like Mark was in the feed for an hour and a half last time you and I got going and said the exact same things. Like we didn't hear from Mark at all for an hour and 50 minutes, and then he's just pushing us along.
Move along, guys.
The officers located Dorsey and explained to him that they were going to
where were you the other
from the property.
Hour and 50
when
minutes?
Dorsey
Now you're
refused to
just
comply with
prodding
the
us.
officer's directions, the officer attempted
He's there to
arrest
make
him
sure
for
we stay on
trespassing.
task.
A scuffle ensued, and both of the officers
Is that
body
really
worn
just
cameras
like
fell to the ground. During this altercation, both
somebody
officers
who
attempted to use
on
their
your
tasers,
side? He's
which
just
had
like
no
the
effect
the
on
referee with a pseudonym.
Who is it? What is it?
I was gonna say, is it like? Never mind.
Okay.
Let's just keep going. I'll tell you what I was gonna say later.
All right, so they're showing tasers. I missed the intro to this one. Why are they tasing a knight? Doesn't it look like they're tasing a knight there? Like he's like out there defending Maid Marian's honor, and he got tased for no good reason.
It is also important to note that Dorsey's size of more than 6 feet, 280 pounds,
Is
was
Shelby one of your
exceptionally
regular
larger
listeners? I
than
feel
both
like she'd
officers
probably
who were
listen to
just
your
over
normal
5
podcast.
She's always on here, and she's a writer too. Good writer. I read one of her papers. She sent it over to me. Her and my daughter have a lot in common. They have the same interests. Medieval history and like good books and stuff like that, I guess. I don't know. All right, so now they're going in there to get the guy who knocked out. No, I think it's. Well, people hear these words and they don't know what it is. If anyone's curious about these things, these topics, there's a guy named Rod Graham. He's a professor at Old Dominion University, and he makes YouTube videos where he goes through all these like terms that we're hearing, like microaggressions and all these different terms, and he just explains what they mean. Like he defines them, and he's very sort of like fair. He's not like, he doesn't have like a political agenda or anything. He's really makes great YouTube videos, and he was on my podcast, so check it out, which you can find.
Some might
on my
say
website.
that you have a political agenda if you are terming and defining microaggressions.
Well, he's a professional sociologist, so he works at a university and he makes videos defining sociological terms, and so microaggression is a sociological term. He also, he would define like, transhumanism or whatever other term. Anyway. I don't think the taser thing. I don't think there's a There's a limit.
I don't care, but you gotta put on your clothes right now.
Some agencies have limits on how many times you can tase people, but it's generally you deliver a 1 5-second burst and then you need to justify doing it again. Some policies will have limits. You can't do X number of times or whatever, but there's no real sort of hard and fast rule usually.
Yes, I have to watch you get dressed.
It looks like an NFL lineman, offensive lineman to me. He's a big dude. Look at the size of his legs.
Good officer safety, checking the stalls, making sure nobody else is in there.
And this guy's already knocked out a security guard, so I would be very careful. He's a big dude, too. Yeah, everyone has a political agenda. Even scientists have political agendas. The questions that they ask are informed by their politics. The methods they choose are informed by their politics. Even if you're working in a lab with test tubes, politics are going to find their way in there eventually. That's why I like it when people are transparent about their political ideology. Just be honest.
I don't care what it is. We're not here just because we want to be here.
Yeah,
We called on you.
I would say magnitude, but let's not go down. This is a slippery slope for us. Mark's going to start yelling at us if we start doing this too much.
I don't know, but I want you to put on your clothes.
Oh. Centrism isn't the only form of acceptable political discourse or positions. And you can be a good scientist and be a right-wing nutjob or a left-wing friggin' trying to overthrow the government and still do good science.
Tell me a good scientist who's a right-wing nutjob now.
A good right-wing nutjob? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know most scientists. Well, my advisor is I would say is a right-winger, and he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met and does fantastic science, social science.
Okay.
Like conservative, like work in Republican administrations at the Department of Justice kind of a guy, like conservative. Like we'll vote for Donald Trump kind of guy, and he's a great scientist. So, anyway.
Are you following my Twitter stuff?
No, I won't. I'm not gonna. I'm not. That's my new rule. No, I'm done with it.
So you stopped following your advisor on Twitter?
He ain't on Twitter.
Okay, well then, why are you looking at yourself in the mirror?
We wouldn't be Facebook friends right now,
I ask you one simple thing. Take your clothes, put it on your body. Alright, let me tell you one simple thing. Stop talking to me. Oh, it's like that, huh? Hurry up.
So what do we really have here, right? Because like this is probably more representative of like some sort of a quote unquote normal call than like most people would imagine, right? Maybe not the naked dude.
That's not
right?
unusual.
But you've got not as unusual as it should be, right? But like, so you've got somebody who committed assault, right? Pretty blatantly, and you've managed to track him down, and now because he's naked, he's actually passively resisting arrest.
He's not getting dressed and doing what he's told, right?
Hurry up, stop dancing, hurry up.
Arrest is...
And he's dancing. Yeah. He just called her a bitch, too. I'm pretty sure he called her a bitch.
So you got verbal noncompliance, passively resisting, and really you're trying to respect like his decency and not sit there and like it's no fun to fight with a naked person for it.
Yeah, I would have done this. I would put him in handcuffs. If he tensed up, I would take him down to the ground.
Do not tense up on me.
I'd leg sweep him right now if he were tensing up on me and put him on the ground. He's already been violent. He's a big dude. He's dangerous. I'm gonna dump him on the ground right here.
So pause it for a second. Let's unpack that because what I think is really tough to appreciate if you've never been in that position, right? So when you start putting hands on people, you being an officer, and you've got physical connection with another human being and you're trying to arrest them, if you're not a person who's fought or wrestled or grabbed a lot of people and had them be non-compliant, there's things that you sense, that you feel, that are articulable, or that you're starting to see. And what they're, we get into this whole de-escalation thing. So they're feeling things with his, in his body now that they're grabbing him because he was passively resisting. and they're telling him stop doing that, right? And normally, that's kind of the the tip of how this frequently goes, where it starts with him tensing up, him being, in this instance, and then it just escalates from there. And then all of a sudden an arm comes free and it comes over, and now he's throwing haymakers, and you worry that you're going to end up like the security guard, right? So plus, because he's naked, you have less to grab onto, so you're trying to factor that in too, right? Like we need traction just like a car does when you're kind of dealing with somebody in combat, and when they're sitting there and they're covered in water or soap or whatever else, it just makes it that much worse, right? As opposed to you as an officer, which has a million things to grab onto, in some sort of, if it comes down to like an actual physical confrontation. So what she's saying there is like, I'm sensing that like you're not relaxed. I can feel it with my hand on your arm, on your forearm, wherever else it is. And you need to relax. And as soon as you do that, I'm going to de-escalate and come down with you. But I know that you're not relaxed now, and this could go one of two ways. So relax so we can get you in cuffs, and we'll get you dressed and go about, our merry business.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have, when I see...
An elephant in the room joke.
Yeah. When I see this right now, this is, to me, one of those instances where having people who know how to use violence and are proficient in the use of violence as police officers is valuable. So if these officers know how to wrestle and they know how to do jiu-jitsu, and they've been training on a regular basis, they're going to have some tools in the tool belt, and be able to deal with this type of a situation. If you go into a situation like this with a guy of this size and you don't have those tools and you panic, this is how unarmed people get shot, because this guy can fuck you up. Like, he can throw you around and hurt you like very easily, unless you're as big as he is. And even if you're as big as he is, he can knock you out. So having officers have the skills that are required to neutralize a threat like this, I think is absolutely vital. And like as soon as he started tensing up, I want to see his legs sweep. I want him on the ground, and then two people getting him into custody quickly. I wouldn't mess around with this guy at all after he's knocked that guy out.
Yeah, and honestly, this is a bigger threat. Like, I would say, you don't go to XYZ MMA gym and roll with naked dudes. No. Right? Like, even then, you have a gi or some shorts, something to grab on. You got nothing but hair.
Right.
And maybe one or two spots to grab onto if it goes sideways on you. So, like, this is an even worse scenario if it comes down to a physical confrontation. Plus, it's tile and metal, stall dividers. Right. Like, if it comes down to going hands-on here, like, there's a million ways where somebody ends up walking away with stitches. It's a bad spot to get into a fight. To the question of, like, how do smaller people deal with that? The silver lining is he's naked. Like, as much as that may be odd, he doesn't have anywhere that he can really hide weapons. So you don't have to worry about that. You just need to worry about fighting him and getting him into a position where you control his arms and get him in cuffs, which is going to be challenging.
And the best way to take away a significant portion of a person's power and ability to deliver kinetic force against you, especially if they're a big person, is to take them off their feet. So I would immediately, if I'm going to engage a person of this size, I want to take away the striking game. I want to get them on the ground, and then I want to get in a dominant position. And there are ways that significantly smaller people with just rudimentary training that is reinforced on a regular basis can utilize those techniques to neutralize a much larger person.
Yeah. It's a dangerous spot no matter what, though,
absolutely.
Right? I think you and I will agree on this. This is the most dangerous spot. Like, Hoist Gracie, back in the day, UFC, whatever, fought like a sumo wrestler, right? And as soon as it got on the ground, it was neutral. The risk for Hoist is the point where you're both standing and you can both throw blows, and getting that to the point where you're on the ground. When you're on the ground, to your point, it's a great neutralizer, but the risk, especially here, especially in the, tying it back to what modern policing is, dealing with, which is it's all on camera, right? Like, you may have to do it. It might be sloppy. It might be ugly getting him on the ground. He may hit his head on something. There may be blood everywhere, and it's going to look horrible because that's how it rolls.
Yeah,
so
I think a taser in this might have been an option as well. Like, this guy's not compliant. He already ag assaulted the security guard, knocked him unconscious out on the pavement. He's huge, and he's being completely non-compliant, and he presents a real risk. I mean, I would have no problem with that, with one of those officers just hitting him with a taser and dumping his ass and putting him in handcuffs under power. I mean, I would be totally good with that. I would feel fine dominating, like getting him down to the ground. But anyway, backup.
Yeah, but you're his side.
Yeah.
No, somebody was saying wait for backup, and that's a tight space. You ain't gonna fit many people in there. Maybe three. Maybe
depends who the backup
maybe
is.
You call the. Yeah, maybe you call the knuckle dragger on the squad who was like a former lineman, right? But like, short of that, like, we're getting to put up or shut up time, and it's potential for getting messy, unfortunately.
And the longer him extending this, he's probing to see what he can do. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Just like your kids, when you tell them no dessert, and they start sticking their finger in the cupcakes.
Or I submit my finger in the cupcakes. All right, those legs are getting swept.
Give me your fucking helmet. Yeah, got it. Hold on.
So this is interesting. Dude's so big, they got to double up
just
on
to
the
get him on,
which is dangerous.
Yep.
Right? Because now, like, I forget the description, but the part of the cuff that sinks into the base of the
tooth,
cuff, like, it's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
So like, if that thing starts flying around and he starts fighting, you can end up in a bad spot.
He does need a man. He needs a man's ear, Michelle. Remember that Seinfeld episode? It's called the man's ear, I think. The male bra. I don't know.
If you said that in front of him, is that microaggressing?
If I said it in front of him, no, it would be just me making fun of him.
that would be aggressive.
Yeah, it would just be me being a dick. But he knocked out that.
What if you didn't know what you were saying?
If I didn't know any better, I guess that might be if I was like, oh, did you need my man? Do you need a man's ear? I can get you a man's ear, and I kept bringing it up, genuinely wanting to help him. Then I think that would be a microaggression. Yeah.
I feel like you got the definitions backwards, but all right. I feel like microaggression is before being a dick and/or passive aggressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's roll with it.
I don't know. Luckily,
yeah,
I don't have a man's ear to offer though, so it doesn't matter.
Is that a thing? Like, the man's ear exists?
I don't know. Somebody on here in this stream needs to jump on Amazon and see if they can find a male bra. I don't know.
Send it to Tom's Twitter address. No,
post a picture and tag me on Twitter of a man's ear, and I'll. Let me see here. So we've got.
That doesn't look like a man's ear.
I guess it's kind of a man's ear.
The dude's got nothing in his ear. What?
Yeah, he doesn't need a man's ear.
If I'm a man who's in a market for some support, and I'm trying to get convinced, nothing about that model is going to make me think.
No, I want to see somebody.
I'm going to feel supported.
I want to see somebody who's having some problems like me, with like extra flesh around the boobie area that are having a rough time. I don't know. I'm not seeing any images of good man's ears. They're all ripped guys. Like, yeah, the camera got knocked off.
While you can only hear the fight in the background, according to officers'
Sorry guys, no
statements,
good man's ear
Dorsey
shots.
and one of the officers ended up on the ground with Dorsey straddling over her, repeatedly punching the officer in her face with his fist. The partner of that officer shot Dorsey to stop this attack.
There you go.
All right, so let's unpack this a little bit for people, right? So you got a naked guy, suspect, no weapons, verbally non-compliant, and committed at least assault with another individual.
They aggravated assault, knocked him out. The guy was motionless on there.
Yeah. I mean, like, to our point earlier, right? Like, you never know when you're throwing a punch if it's going to turn into potentially like a manslaughter. So anyway, you've got hard tile floors all around. Probably a guy who, I mean, what the average female weight in this country is, 100 pounds. Wink.
Yeah.
But so you've got a 200 plus pound male on top of a female officer. And, and this is based off of, their accounts. You can't see anything. The one thing you can kind of see from this is, wherever it went sideways after the cameras dropped, they probably moved 20, 25 feet in a tile room with plenty of sharp edges, right? And every single one of those, like 240-pound guy pushes into you and you're 100 pounds, you hit your head on a corner, any of those, and like it could be life-threatening, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then he gets to the point where he's on top of the female officer. This is all just, kind of conjecture and relaying what they're telling us here.
I believe it based on the other stuff I saw.
Any single strike, a single strike could be deadly, right? So you're not necessarily going to get to a point where like you tase first and then hope, that it works out and the taser works, because he's basically visiting like deadly force on that female officer. If she's down, her head's on the tile and so forth. So
yeah, size matters. It like the size of the officers, the size of the suspect, the age, all their capabilities, all that matters.
That's what he said.
And that's what he said. And like you said, I mean, if I had a female partner on the ground with a 300-pound man on top of her, punching her in the face with the cement there, I mean, I have no problem shooting him. There's the body cam got knocked off. Let's see if they.
Dorsey was pronounced dead at the scene by Los Angeles Fire
Department. Kind of like Morbid. It was like, oh, here's where the body cam went down.
Both officers received injuries during the initial altercation.
So she was 5'5", 145 pounds. Oh no, that was the male officer, I guess. 5'5", 145. She's 5'1", 140 pounds. That's tiny. Like 140-pound person, 145-pound person, either one of them, I can just throw them around like at will. That's not very big.
Microaggression. I'm just playing. I think the female is actually bigger in this case.
Was it the female was the 5'5"?
Officer 2, injury suspect with his
resident of Maryland.
I got a bunch of things popped up there, so maybe I'm
with
missing
his elbow
it. I'm
and
just
fractured
trying to
his,
read
fractured his nose. Officer number 2, his nose. So so the female was 5'5", 145, which is small. I mean, it's not tiny for a woman, but it's
Dorsey was a
small.
30-year-old resident of Maryland and recently arrived to the Los Angeles area and was recently arrested for trespassing.
He's
at
280
the
pounds.
in Los Angeles.
That's a big
That's
boy.
a big man.
In the next several months.
All right, let's see here. I think this one we already saw. This is the foot pursuit we already saw. Okay. Here's another Russian video.
Russian protest?
I had a Russian thing today. I put in Russian police and I pulled 3 up. This is them.
Today?
Yeah, just today. These are them recent Russian ones that I just thought it was interesting to see how different it looks. It looks like some kind of phalanx. It's a rough-looking city.
Brutalism architecture, man.
Когда я тебе объясняю, ты не в тот момент, ты не в то время, значит,
Значит, ты меня указываешь, ты мне должен указывать, когда мне вставать, когда мне выйти погулять. Походу, что-то веселое будет.
Anywho, I don't know why I pulled this one up. Anyway. Alright, we got a couple more here. Alright, there's more footage. This was trending on Twitter.
Is this Portland?
This is Portland.
Oh man, we tend to disagree on Portland.
I already saw this one. I don't have an issue with this one. I think this is actually pretty good. So you have the guy reaches for the officer's baton and grabs it. The officer pulls it away. They take him down to the ground. They have officers form a shield around him. And they get rip restraint out and they put him in custody. Then you got a resisting arrest, and I think you got an aggravated assault charge as well. I don't know. That is what I like to see, actually. Go ahead.
I'm just reading through the thread here. Stone Marxism. I'm not even going to touch that because what the hell do I know about that? Apparently, somebody is asking for legal advice because they're getting stalked. Call your local police department, non-emergency number. Those exist.
Do that, and even if it's not something that gets taken action on, document it, and then what was the other thing you were going to say, Sean?
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, that's basically what I was going to say. Is you have 911, which is for actual emergencies, and not to say that having a stalker doesn't feel like one, but if they're not standing outside your window and it's not an immediate threat, call a non-emergency number. Tell them you want to make a report and have them send an officer out and document whatever's going on. And that's the first step for that one. What else? Krav Maga. What do you think of Krav Maga?
So I think Krav Maga has some utility as a self-defense techniques. It's not my first choice, but especially if you're a smaller person or female and you're worried about getting attacked while you're jogging, or if you're in the military and you're going to be, for something like that, but for domestic policing, I think it's too reliant on strikes and targeting eyes and genitals and things like that. It just doesn't make it applicable to American policing. I'm a big fan of jiu-jitsu and American wrestling, like what you learn in high school wrestling, college wrestling. I think ground control techniques for police officers are, in my mind, the preferred tactics. I don't see a lot of instances where officers punching people in the faces it does a lot of good. I would much rather see officers that can take someone down to the ground, gain a dominant position, wear somebody out, and put them in handcuffs. Well, what about you?
I don't think about Krav Maga.
I don't think about. Oh, Adam Smith.
That's my answer.
Adam Smith just got blocked.
That's my 2-second answer. So, there is a point, and there's some good combatives that are lethal by nature, right? And my understanding of Krav Maga is at least a handful of that probably falls into that category. So if you're at the point where you need to do some James Bondish, that maybe that's more pertinent, but settling a measuring contest at the local bar, probably not what's going to suit you best.
Or policing, in a situation,
to me, it's I wouldn't even consider that for policing. I don't honestly though. I don't know a cop who's I know Krav Maga.
Wasn't a big. Now I think.
I know one cop who said that.
If my daughter was like, "Hey, I walk home from school every night, and I'm going to go take some Krav Maga classes," I'd be like, "All right, well, just make sure you get real good at targeting the nuts and eyeballs, because that shit's effective." A lot of the brutal, nasty, dirty stuff is the most effective. There's a reason why they don't let you poke people in the eyes in the UFC, because it works.
If you're worried about the worst case scenario when a bad guy finds you. There's a lieutenant colonel or colonel during World War II who wrote a good book on that too. Rex, I'm going to say Rex Chapman, but I think he was an NBA player. Rex something, but Google it, you'll find him. World War II colonel or lieutenant colonel, and he wrote a whole book on how to mortally wound people, and it was, it's sadistic, but if that's what you're worried about, and I might be if I was thinking I was being stalked.
There you go.
Roll with that.
The other thing about the stalk,
talk about stabbing people in the taint, dude. That was one of the things. That was a tactic. It's if you stab somebody in the taint, medics physically can't stop that bleeding. So like that's how you do it. So like stab people in the taint.
Taint stab.
What else we got here? Marxism and Seattle, how'd that work out? Checkpoint shooting. Oh, okay. What else? I'm just trying to read this thread here. Man, I got economic and political in there. Anything you want to pick out of that one?
The Civil War thing, I'll touch on that and say that I don't think we're in a civil war, but I do believe that the homicide rates that we're seeing, the increases in homicide rates, someone's going to need to do the study, do the research, collect the data, and analyze the data. But the last 400 years of data suggests that public trust is one of the key indicators for rates of violence within a society. And we've had these homicide spikes across the country. And my guess is that it's because people have lost trust in police when they're a victim of a crime or feel disrespected in their community. Rather than not doing anything or filing a police report, people and their friends tend to take the law into their own hands. So whereas a year ago, someone got robbed on the way home from school, there might have been a police report filed. Now it turns into a shooting, a retaliatory shooting, and then there's another shooting in retaliation for that retaliatory shooting, and you get a cycle of violence. And that cycle of violence is quite often directly tied to levels of trust within a society. So these past few months with this diminished trust, the violence that we're seeing across the country, I think, is directly related to the civil unrest. So I would say that we're not in a civil war, but we're experiencing low-grade civil conflict that's related to political happenings, if that makes sense.
So I'm going to disagree partially. I think that could be the case. Alternatively, if you've got an environment where it's not appropriate, never mind that. If police are being disincentivized to police, then that creates a void. So take, for instance, Portland, right? So Portland's gun enforcement unit was stood down, and they were the unit that within the police department that was proactively targeting and arresting, gun violence offenders. And you have this spike the second that the mayor stood them down. So, and I don't know. I am open to either of these being the scenario.
Let me just say that that's a valid hypothesis, that people who are some really intelligent people have shown statistically that there may be some increases in crime related to police disengaging. So that's a totally valid argument. What I would say is that over the last several hundred years, that as data has been collected, while police withdrawing may have an association, that the amount, like the percentage of the change is probably much more closely related to a loss of trust than it is police disengagement.
We have 700 years worth of data on police disengagement.
On public trust. So we have over 400, just easily 400 years of data where we can show back to the 1600s. There's a great book. It's called Homicide. Oh shit. Anyway, the guy basically they go through homicide rates the last about 400 years now in England and the United States. We've been keeping decent homicide statistics. Like when someone gets murdered, it usually gets recorded somewhere, even for the last 400 years. And what they've shown consistently is if you overlay public trust data and then you compare that to homicide rate changes, and then you look at all the other things that we think theoretically may lead to increases in homicide rates, that over the long term, the single most consistent indicator of that homicide rates will go up is diminished public trust. Like during periods like where public trust is high, people tend to call the police more. They tend to refer to courts, and it's about believing that your government will represent your interests in a fair and impartial way and dispense justice for you. And if people feel that, they're much less likely to engage in vigilantism. And what I'm thinking about is poor people in the Appalachia and in inner cities who are engaging in like retaliatory type of things. And I think there's just tons of evidence going back all the way back before the United States was a country, back to England, like during the English Civil War. Like that's how far back I'm talking about going, kind of thing. Anyway.
Mark made a comment about insight into why arrested folks are getting released without bail immediately.
I don't know.
After Michelle laughed at my taint stabbing. And I think he's referring to Portland. So for everybody who, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong here, right? But my understanding is federal officers in Portland agreed to, quote unquote, stand down. The Oregon State Police, at least in part, agreed to step in and start taking on some of those law enforcement functions that maybe the federal government was doing. And then, I think what Mark is alluding to, and we could talk about if this is a fair premise, is that the Multnomah County District Attorney is not charging folks who are getting arrested for rioting. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but is that novel? You want to touch on that one?
I don't know. I'm not really sure like how long they're holding people, how long they're releasing people. I don't know. And I think a lot of it is usually just people on the ground making the decisions what's in the best interest of so police commanders and county attorneys based on how much resources they have, for me, I think you would agree with this, Sean, that sometimes solving a problem is just you need to solve it for the night. So like the domestic violence case, the drunk driver, it's about throwing someone in handcuffs, extricating them from that environment and letting them cool off, and not necessarily about charges following.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens when an arrest happens.
Go ahead. All right.
Right. So, because I think that will provide the framework for everybody here who is commenting to think about how your average criminal justice system works in the U.S., right? So police officers, in order to make an arrest, need to have probable cause, right? And there needs to be a series of articulable facts for whatever that charge is that lead them to believe that it's more likely than not that the suspect was guilty of committing that crime. And if they do, they have the right to put cuffs on them and book them into jail, or release them with a criminal citation for that violation, right? So if they choose, what happens after? So if the officer decides that probable cause exists, and I shouldn't even say decides, if they see facts in their perception or, from third parties to support that criminal charge, what happens after that in most states in the country?
So
I'm letting you talk. Take it from
so
there.
You're saying so the probable cause is established.
Probable cause
and arrest
exists
is made.
In the officer's mind, an arrest is made. He decides to book. What happens from there on out?
Usually you're going to have some type of, you're always going to have some type of initial hearing. So you're going to have an opportunity to be presented before a judge. So you go to jail usually within 24 hours of the time you're arrested. It's the responsibility of the court to present you before a magistrate, an impartial magistrate. So a judge who hears what evidence has been presented indicating that you've committed a crime. And if that judge makes two decisions, they say, okay, is there enough probable cause for the state to file charges here? Does this person, their check on the officer's power? And they say, okay, yes, there's enough probable cause here for the state to file charges, fair enough. And then they make an assessment on what type of danger this person represents to the community, the severity of the crime. There's a whole host of things that go into making the decision, and usually there's some type of process in place, like forms that are filled out and an equation. And a lot of times they're really stupid and they're not well thought out and they're arbitrary, but there's some type of process, and then a decision is made based on resources, the severity of the crime, and a whole bunch of other things, whether or not we're going to just release this person, whether or not we're going to require a bond, or whether or not we're going to hold them without bond. And the presumption is that someone will be released and given a date to return to court unless you can articulate why you need to hold them or require them to post a bond.
So in that initial hearing, who shows up typically in terms of just the big part, the 3 or 5 big parties? Who shows up and what are they doing, and what are the decisions they have to make at that hearing?
So at a probable cause, here's the thing: there can be multiple ways that this goes depending on the jurisdiction that you're in.
I'm saying, so you got booked into jail for XYZ arrest, right? You're getting your initial hearing. Felony or misdemeanor could be a little bit different in terms of timing, right? But you were booked into jail because there was a probable cause that you committed a criminal violation, misdemeanor, or felony. Who's showing up to that initial appearance, and what are their roles, and how are they discussing and talking about what's going to happen and what the outcome is from there?
So usually you're going to have a prosecutor whose job, someone who works at the prosecutor's office whose job is just to handle initial appearances. They're usually not going to be the attorney that's assigned to it. You're going to have the judge. You're going to have the court staff that work there, and then you're going to have it depends on the nature of the crime. Sometimes they may not have an attorney with them, but usually there's going to be an attorney that's there with them to represent the interest of the person that's accused. And then maybe, not always, but you may have the officer come in and testify to the probable cause and describe any witnesses or anything that was in the probable cause statement. That's basically how I would look at it.
Okay, so officers write a probable cause statement when they book the individual into jail. They say, hey, here's what I saw. Here's the proof that I have. Here are the witnesses or victims. Here's what they said. Maybe even here, typically it's written, so there's no evidence per se, but it's a written account of the law enforcement officer who's booking. That gets forwarded to the prosecutor, whoever's standing in as the public defender for the victim, and the judge, and they're all reading that probable cause statement, right? And then based off of that, the judge ultimately will kind of hear the initial sides from each and then make a decision. And he may say, you're a Holbrook person, and not necessarily that, but this is very credible and is a highly violent crime, and the risk of releasing you to public, into the public is greater than XYZ. Therefore, I'm going to find that, you'll be held until trial unless you post X amount of bond or X amount of cash bond, which just means you need to come up with more money or, whatnot. Or maybe in the most extreme case, there's no scenario, zero bond, that will allow us, the state, to release you from custody right now to go back out in the public. Right. On the flip side, if the probable cause statement is really weak and isn't convincing, or the prosecutor doesn't make a convincing case, even though the PC probable cause statement is convincing, then maybe that person gets let go.
Or the officer just does a shitty job of filling out their paperwork, or,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So all these things can happen. And then add in the layer of, so the prosecutor who's showing up and representing the police, and this is the case in most counties I can think of, ultimately reports up to a county attorney, which is a political figure. So, and, back to Shelby's comments earlier, in a lot of these, there could be a more directly involved county attorney who's directing all of the prosecutors and deputy county attorneys under them on how to charge or what the criteria is for the statement, and vice versa, right? So going back to, tying it back into Mark's comment, if you've got a county attorney who's setting the criteria for which they will seek charges and or what they'll ask of the judge and or the court during that initial appearance, anything's possible in terms of what happens from there on out, because they're one of the three parties making this decision.
Yeah, it could go. There's any number of reasons why people can be released. There's a whole bunch of different ways it can happen. Sometimes it could be people that should get released that don't, but usually I would argue, like in my experience, there were a lot of times where I was like, what the hell? How did that guy get released? But remember the guy? Well, our boxer guy got killed because he was,
so when I talk about examples of people getting released when they shouldn't, that's one that comes to mind. Give the 2-second, 10-second summary of.
So me and my partner were investigating like serial burglars and we set up on this house because we had a tip from patrol that these guys were a fence, which means they were buying stolen property in exchange for drugs. And so one of our jobs was to target fences, like so people who fence stolen property. So we were sitting, it was like 7 a.m, and we're sitting up doing surveillance on this house, and we see this guy drive up in a car, reaches underneath the dash and pulls out some, like, look like he was reaching to get some dope, and then he goes into the house and comes out with a laptop computer. So it looked like, okay, he's stealing, he's went in there and he got a stolen laptop. We think this is a fence. So we stop him just to check to see if we work our way into the car, we get into the computer. Sure enough, it had just been taken in a burglary earlier that day. We end up writing a search warrant on the house. While we're there, we see a guy show up with a bag, a big giant duffel bag full of guns. We didn't know there were guns at the time until we got in the house, and they're all stolen guns. And we saw this guy go in with the stolen guns. So we arrest the guy and book him. He's on release for homicide at the time. So he had stabbed somebody to death and was awaiting trial, like awaiting the next hearing on a homicide charge. We charged him with like 17 counts of possession of stolen guns that had been taken in burglaries while he was a prohibited possessor. So he had like 18 counts of being a prohibited possessor of a gun. 2 officers witnessed him arrive with the bag, and he made some statements during the interview. So we had him dead to rights and booked him into jail. And it was a Friday, and I went home and I got a call on Saturday night saying that he'd been murdered. And I was like, well, how could he be murdered? He was in jail. And the judge released him on his own recognizance. So he got released, and the judge said, well, no bond, just show up to court. A felon who's on release with 18 stolen gun counts and accused of running a property theft ring. And he got released on his own recognizance. Well, the Mexican mafia guys that he hung out with assumed, what would they assume? That he's a snitch, even though he wasn't a snitch. So they kidnapped him and put 4 or 5 bullets in his head, I think. I think something like that. So they just murdered this guy. Anyway, that's the story of a guy getting released for when he should have been held in custody, and the guys on the street just assumed he was a snitch.
I'm trying to pluck through a bunch of comments here, but and tell me if I'm tailoring this too much here, but there was a comment from Michelle. Essentially, what happens if a mayor and or a DA starts making a blatantly disregarding the law, right? Pertaining to protecting the public. So rephrase that question however you want, but how do you want to answer Michelle?
I think there would need to be some type of statute that said that the person in this particular job function shall do X, or they're violating this particular criminal statute. And if they did that, then they should be held accountable. But what I would guess would be is that there aren't any statutes that dictate what they must do. So I think that most people can go in there and be super light-handed or heavy-handed or do a lot of crazy shit that we may think is bullshit, but there's probably not going to be some statute where we can arrest people, kind of a thing, like a mayor.
Yes, political figures.
Yeah, and there's a good reason for that, to protect political figures from state, because imagine if you get the wrong person in charge of a police department who then decides to politicize them and start arresting political figures. It's dangerous.
Is there accountability? Yes. Political accountability.
The ballot box.
Is the short answer. It's funny. I think I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I read once that elected politicians don't need an actual security clearance in the federal government to hear secret and or higher classified material. By the fact that they're elected by the public, they're automatically deemed to have that level of clearance. Therefore, there's no actual background check like you or I might have gone through.
And there's a lot of there's a reason they've separated these things, and it goes back. If you read about the initial the first police departments in London and New York and Boston, people were really apprehensive about having them, because they're do we really want a bunch of armed men in uniforms running, because they thought, it's like an army. but the pressures of the industrialization of you know, the industrial revolution of bringing all these people in the cities made it a requirement. So there was this negotiation where they're like, well, we want a lot of checks on the power of these armies because they looked at so that's where you get this distinction between military and police, and the modern police departments were negotiated. You know, they're not just something that we've had forever. It's a new thing, like modern police departments.
Yeah, for sure. I think your average person might be surprised to know that, like, if you elect somebody, if you check a box next to Democrat or Republican in a voting booth and you're putting them into federally elected position, you better have done the background check in order for them to receive classified material, because the way the federal government and the laws are written, you are clearing them in the federal government's eyes to hear about aliens and covert operations and take your pick. What else? So I don't think most people know that, and that's why I think most people, like what Pearl Tongue just said, like why don't we arrest corrupt politicians? Well, because there are very few rules in place where we can actually arrest politicians, and even when it's such a delicate, like getting a prosecutor or a county attorney to go after a politician is going to be difficult. It's high stakes. It's complicated. How are we defining a corrupt politician too?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about they're breaking a law, like they're taking bribes or doing something like that. Then I'm all for it. But even then, it's exceedingly difficult. You got to have all your ducks in a row, because it's a lot easier to go out and arrest somebody who doesn't have any power. When people have power, it makes things more even if it's a rich housewife from the suburbs, it's a lot more difficult, and you got to be a lot more careful dealing with them, because they have power and influence. They can call politicians, they can call policymakers. Whereas if you're dealing with some asshole who just got out of DOC, they don't have that power to draw upon, and you have more leeway in how you can operate.
I don't think you could be arrested. Pearl Tongue, this is a good one. Let's. I'm trying to like pick here and find constructive grievances to focus on, right? So Pearl Tongue, why can you arrest me for not signing a traffic citation when you can't arrest Hillary Clinton when she commits perjury? Let's table the whole if Hillary committed perjury or not. But like, there's a fair question in there, tying to the point of the difficulty of convicting people in power versus your average person.
Let's assume she did. Let's say that she committed perjury. Well, the patrol officer, that's not going to be their jurisdiction, first of all. So
is that a microaggression again?
What? Oh,
I'm just playing. I'm just messing around.
I think she's awful, so I have no problem saying. I think anyway, I get my politics in it, but so if she commits, so say she committed perjury. It wouldn't be like a patrol officer who's writing the citation's job anyway. And if it was within a police department's jurisdiction, it would be like someone in some detail who investigates. Patrol officer doesn't have the tools, skills, resources, or time to investigate something like that. It would probably be something that would be handled by, if it's testifying before Congress, Congress has a sergeant at arms that has arrest powers. The Congress can issue subpoenas, file charges. So it would be like the court would be Congress, and their apparatus would be their law enforcement apparatus would be completely separated from the apparatus that manages us. So I think that's the thing. And then on top of that, you add in all of the complications of the politics. So I think there's been lots of examples of politicians who've committed crimes and lied and in front of Congress or to the FBI and committed crimes that don't get charged, and I wish they would. That's my answer. What about you?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, you hit on a bunch of important points. The one thing I would say, so there's two types of traffic citations. There's a criminal and a civil. If you disagreed and refused to sign a civil traffic citation, which is not criminal, I don't think you would get arrested for that. If it was a criminal one, like you're doing 110 and a 25, and you were being so reckless when you were breaking that law, then if you were to receive a quote unquote citation, which is really just a citation in lieu of detention, aka you didn't murder somebody, so I'm going to let you go home if you agree to sign this, which is you're certifying the service of that citation by signing, and you refuse to do it, then you'd get sent on your, you would force the officer's hand and you would get booked into jail because he was doing you a favor by not booking you into jail because you basically broke a law and you refused to. So all that being said, these are two totally different scenarios from a high profile, perjury federal investigation and the parties that go into those. But the bottom line is Hillary or whoever, take your pick, powerful person, left or right, has way more capital, resources, and relationships, both in terms of legal representation and otherwise, to levy against whatever charge it is than you, the average person who's just trying to pull your socks up and show up for 40 hours and treat sick people or teach, disruptive kids how to count or add or whatever. And that's the difference is, there's a lot in modern society where when you accumulate enough status, wealth, power, capital, you're able to hire all these people to do these things for you while you still do your 40-hour-a-week job. And that's the big difference. And it doesn't sit well. And we can have a fair conversation about that, but that's what it amounts to. When you've got a foundation or, X amount of dollars in your bank account, you can pay people to take on all those headaches and advocate for you, which your average working class person doesn't have that opportunity.
And the other thing is, if you have a certain amount of power, you just write the laws to suit your own interests. You have lobbying groups, and you change laws over time to facilitate your fleecing. So,
I've heard a definition of power that it is, laws are basically codified power, and I think that there's fair conversation to be had over that. That's what it is. It's a finite pie of persuasion and ability and so forth. And every once in a while it gets codified in a law and it stays static until you start changing it.
It's all shit we've made up that we decided on. Like there's nothing that's illegal in a state of nature. Like if we're living, 10, 20,000 years ago, we're out in the bush living day to day. It wasn't illegal for me to bash someone's brains in. It's because we came together as a society and we all agreed not all agreed. This social contract has evolved where we have given a certain amount of power to the state and they can write laws and regulate our behavior. But it's nothing of it is like natural. It's all just constructed by us. And when you have power, you can shield yourself from that. And it's just not. We don't live in an equal society. No society is equal, and nor has any society ever been equal. So yeah, we got one more. You want to jump into the last one, or you got more comments?
No, I think we kind of hit everything in the feed we could. Right. So let's do one more, and we'll call it a night.
The last one, and then I'm gonna go get some rack because I had a long day. Fun day tonight. But not the rest of the day. All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Captain Patricia Sandoval, and I'm the Commanding Officer of Media Relations Division, doing numerous with Police Commissioner. Understanding
I'm going to skip through her intro
audio
here.
Provides you disturbing to some. When a police officer, it can.
Commander Alan Hamilton
here
of the Force
is.
Investigation
Alan,
Division
my
of
man.
the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm going to give you a brief overview of an incident that occurred within the LAPD's northeast area in the community of Highland Park. It began on May 20th,
the Portland DA got dismissed, or blanket dismissed rioters, and one of them killed people. Will they be held responsible? Michelle.
Your officer
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say at the ballot box. Is that the short answer?
I have no idea what the arrest numbers are like, or I have no idea.
Just take it if a district attorney blanket dismissed any criminals, right? And one of them committed a crime afterwards, will they be held responsible?
Well, it depends on
legally.
Not legally, no. The prosecutors can decide to file charges or not file charges all they want. They're not breaking any law, but depends on how they're appointed to their position. If they're elected, then people can go vote them out. But that's up to the good people of Portland. What do they want? So that's
exactly that's and that you and I are on the same page there 100%. I just wanted to send that
in
home,
Texas,
right?
people might
really
want to arrest them, and then in Portland they may not want to arrest them. That's their decision.
Yeah, and that's yes. So that's the thing to keep in mind here, right? So like the boxer case you were talking about, right? The prosecutor in that instance and what they asked for is representative of the guidance they've received from, in part, maybe not, but generally speaking, it could be the district attorney, county attorney that they report to, right? So if the county attorney that they report to says these are the criteria for us to, ask for XYZ, and it doesn't meet it, and that's all based off of the district and or county attorney, then they may not ask for that at the initial hearing, or there may be an aspect to the judge, and what, their calculus is. So all that being said, I'm just adding detail to the exact same thing you're saying, which is ultimately there's probably not anything criminal that the prosecutors, assistant prosecutors, assistant deputy whatevers are doing there. It's reflective, at least in part, of the laws that they're following
and the political decisions that are being made.
The guidance there and the political decisions that are being made.
With this case, so what's happening in Portland right now, I can guarantee that the most powerful people in that city and in that state are directly involved in voicing and shaping what happens with terms of arrest and how those standards, because it's a political issue. So this is not just some police commander or some rando county attorney, assistant county attorney who's making the decisions. They're being told, hey bro, here's what you're gonna do, here's your standards, and they're gonna do what they're told. I would argue anyway.
We would agree.
All right.
Last one.
Patrolling the area
LA.
of Figueroa Street and North Avenue 52. While patrolling the area, the officers located a stolen Honda sedan and began to follow the vehicle. Once the occupants of the Honda realized they were being followed,
stolen
F-150
and Dodge Rams,
Dodge Neons.
You will now hear the initial radio transmission from one of the officers in the patrol car.
Those things all broke down. They ain't on the road anymore.
I once had a guy steal a brand new Cadillac. And okay, I'm going to say this. Hypothetically, a guy stole a brand new Cadillac in fictitious land that I was not involved with. And these two officers went and found this stolen vehicle, this stolen Cadillac, and recovered it, and were driving it back to their jurisdiction to return to the owner. And it hypothetically, the officer who looked a lot like me was in the patrol car while his partner was driving the Cadillac. And this officer in the patrol car, being the hard charger that he was, continued to run plates the whole way back into the city because he is always looking for stolen cars, and just happened to find another stolen car while they're driving back, went in. And by no means, in no way did those two officers get on another frequency and chase the shit out of a stolen car in a stolen Cadillac. And anyway, that was fun.
A police supervisor and an LAPD helicopter, referred to as an airship.
In the wrong city, chasing a stolen car in a stolen car.
Vehicle. We are northbound Echo heading towards Avenue 52. It's going to be a white Honda 8. Boy, Victor Tom 894 requesting backup airship and a supervisor. We're now northbound 52 from Echo back towards
So all they got's a stolen, right? She's asking for airship.
Yep.
So the officer cleared on the radio, said we have a stolen vehicle. I want helicopter, more units, and a supervisor to monitor this.
Here's the plate number.
Here's the plate number.
And here's the plate number I'm seeing.
And they're seeing it. So they got an occupied stolen in front of them. Did you hear anything else about the stolen? Like, was it taken at gunpoint? Any information about anything like that? No, nothing like that.
More assistance. Whenever they were
I'm just pointing out because, we've seen other instances recently where there's a stolen vehicle and there's some sort of discrepancy between the stolen vehicle and the plate and so forth. So what she's saying there is, hey, I'm behind it. Give me X, Y, and Z resources, and here is the plate that I'm
behind it right now.
And that's all she knows.
I'm behind it right now. I'm behind it right now.
That plate could have been from a different vehicle. like maybe it ran a red light, maybe I just ran it randomly, but this is the plate I'm seeing, and here we are. Get me these resources because it looks like it's a stolen, but she's in real time now. She doesn't have the opportunity to go back and say, "Oh, this was a 1997 stolen Honda, but this is a 2001 stolen, Honda in front of me." That all went out the window.
To get in or are in a vehicle pursuit, so they safely pursue the vehicle and ultimately take the suspects into custody.
Jose Figueroa. Thanks, Proton.
Here you will see digital in-car video footage of the initial pursuit.
Digital, not analog. We're in the modern
They
era.
have 9mm film in the car. So what do you think about chasing a stolen car? If it's just,
it's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a shit ton of fun. So if you're if you're a supervisor right now, what do you say?
It's not a lot of fun. Stop it. I'm making.
Well, like, they're just let's talk about that. So say you're a supervisor, your job is to supervise a squad, and you hear this over the radio. What are you going to ask right now of these officers that are following this vehicle?
So, by being a supervisor, your responsibility and opportunity is to look at it from a higher level, because it's like you put a bunny in front of a fox. Yep. Fox is like, "Oh, bunny, go."
I wanted to chase everything when I was a patrol officer. I wanted to chase everything.
It's natural. It is human instinct to chase something if you think you're a fox and you're going after a bunny, right? That being said, supervisors and everybody else above them and every department in the country has multiple layers of this oversight on duty at all times, are thinking about it. Okay, what's the bigger picture here? And do we want to let that occur, or is this short-sighted because of any one of a number of things? So in this case, a stolen car, if it wasn't taken at gunpoint or it wasn't involved in another violent crime, is a property crime akin to a burglary. So in modern police departments, it took a little time to get there, honestly, and start thinking about it in this way, because the thought was chase it till the wheels come off. And unfortunately, in any dynamic event in an urban city or otherwise, bad shit happens when you do it. So they kind of had to take that back. Back to Mark's comment, our supervisors are always monitoring. As far as I know, there's always a sergeant who is monitoring, should be, a individual frequency in the city about what's going on.
And this officer asked for one, said, "Hey, get a supervisor on here because I want them to be knowing what I'm doing."
Even better. So, hey, supervisors got a good life. They're getting a couple extra bucks more a year. Maybe they're at Denny's talking to other sergeants or smoking a cigar in a vacant field, because that's what you get paid the big bucks to do till something goes off. Hey, make sure they're listening, dispatch, because this is going to get sideways in a second here, or I think it will. And I want to make sure I'm covered. I'm doing the right things. I want somebody to check up on me and ensure that I'm doing it, because right now I'm the fox chasing the bunny, potentially.
Right.
So kudos to them for asking for that. That's a show, I would say, of humility and consciousness in that moment. All that being said, it's still stolen property unless you have no idea. So is it worth creating the risk to the public to pursue that and create that dynamic event, which will follow as soon as you turn those lights
And
on?
is this a pursuit yet? I don't know if this is a pursuit yet.
No, but
yeah. So when there's an officer, so if I'm the supervisor, right, I'm thinking, I want to hear, are you guys, I thought it might be the first question I ask him, what's his speed? Are you guys, is this a pursuit or what's going on? No, boss, he's driving normal and we're behind him and we're going to initiate a traffic stop. You're okay with that at this point, right? I'm okay with this, right? Yeah, so as long as he's not fleeing, right? All right, so let's see what happens.
And is driving at a high rate of speed.
Oh, so they're saying he is driving at a high rate of speed. Okay, so now
the driver of the vehicle runs through several stop signs and is driving at a high rate of speed.
So we got a pursuit.
So it looks like the bright light is shining in the rear view. Chances are he knows there's a police officer behind him.
He's blowing stop.
There's a couple of stop
signs. Yeah.
He's blowing by. So he's not obeying, traffic law at this point.
Focus
But
your
it's
attention
still
on
just
the passenger side
civil
of the
and a
stolen white
property.
Honda.
Maybe
Here
felony
you will see the
if
passenger,
there's a
later
police officer
identified as
behind you.
24-year-old Andrew
you're fleeing.
Guerrero, point a shotgun out of the window.
Okay,
and
so
shoot at
this
the
changes
officers.
everything. So I would argue that initially when they're following it, it's fine. As soon as that vehicle starts taking off, those officers shouldn't chase it anymore. But then this guy produces a shotgun and points a shotgun out of the window at the officers. Now you have a whole completely different ballgame because it's no longer just a property crime. But think about the type of person that leans out the side of a stolen car and points a shotgun at officers. That's a dangerous fleeing felon at this point. Would you agree there?
I mean, it's not just somebody that wants to party.
No.
It's way more than wanting to
Way
party.
more than wanting to party in a very disturbing kind of way, maybe. All right, so point this. We're going to see this pointing the gun. So we see here. Yeah, I think that's looks fair enough that would be a shotgun. He's leaning out and he levels it. It's hard. It's kind of fuzzy, but it looks like someone leveling a long gun at the.
In Minecraft, it's a shotgun.
Yeah, in Minecraft, it's a shotgun. Now I don't know if they discharge that shotgun or not.
The driver officer then broadcasts officer needs help and notifies the responding units that the suspects are armed with a shotgun and firing at the police vehicle.
Oh, firing at the police vehicle. So here are all.
So does that change the calculus now? So you went from property crime to
gunfight. Right now, this is a deadly force encounter.
Violent. It's a violent fleeing felon, right? As soon as that shotgun came out the window.
And now that they're shooting at me, like, it's on, like Donkey Kong. There's no, we're gonna neutralize this threat as best we can.
Tom ain't playing around. He's gonna get a Apache gunship and a bomber and a bulldozer to see this thing through.
Absolutely.
What's muzzle flash?
So the muzzle flash is when. So the way a firearm works is there's a small explosion inside of the firearm, and that explosion creates pressure that launches the projectile down the barrel of the gun. And when the projectile emerges from the firearm, behind it and alongside of it, there will be a little flash of light from the explosion. So the incinerating of the gunpowder creates a little bit of fire, and that's the muzzle flash. So it's like the flash you see.
Is it pretty unique, or is it easy to confuse with a flashlight?
It's a muzzle flash is very. It's like very boom, like a little blast, and it's very distinct to me. How about you? What do you think? Yeah,
Yes.
It's a muzzle flash. You're gonna with a bang too. It's a big clue. And we'll see the muzzle flash here, I guess. Not great video, but there it is. You can see like a little flash.
It's a 1 hour deal, not a 2 red hour deal.
It needs to be a bigger flash for 2. Yeah, it's a flintlock. It's a flintlock.
Almost
Sam.
every uniformed police officer assigned to field enforcement duties. The cameras are body worn. She then retrieves the police shotgun and fires at the suspects. As this is occurring, the suspect continues to shoot at the officers.
The B-roll, taser body cam footage there, like it's almost like an ad.
So now we got. So we got. I think we've got the front passenger seat, riding shotgun and leaning out and discharging the shotgun at the suspect vehicle while they're still fleeing.
62 shots fired. Officer needs help. Give me your.
So this is a rolling gunfight between police.
I think so. Jeez.
Give me the shotgun.
No, she hasn't shot yet.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
62, I think he has a shotgun, the passenger on the right.
Oh, yeah, she just racked one. I heard that.
Yeah, I just heard a shotgun rack.
That's a distinct sound.
Leaning out the window.
Oh
police
yeah.
car collides
You
with the curb and another
mistake
vehicle.
that for
No.
The officers check with one another.
The shed door
to
closing
they're
outside
okay.
by accident from wind.
Sorry, 26.
11-8 That's her. That's the officer.
26, we got 2 male passengers in front.
Officers on.
Come on, get to the camera. It's okay. We're all right.
That's not good.
Get out? No, get out of the car.
They then coordinate with the responding
he's like, man, they just wrecked the car.
units to help locate the suspects.
Like, what are these guys doing?
Responding officers locate the suspect's vehicle a couple blocks from where the officers lost sight
buckshot
of
there, or enough rounds from the officer, I guess.
As the suspects ran off on foot.
Took out the window.
After a search of the area, both suspects were found nearby and arrested.
Shelby, it would seem so.
Salinas was transported to the hospital, where he was treated for superficial gunshot injuries and was cleared by medical personnel for booking
officer engaging
in an LAPD
yeah, it looks
jail
like
facility.
To be fair, they got shot at first.
And located a loaded sawed-off shotgun with a pistol grip.
What do you think, Sean, about? So you're in the front passenger seat of a patrol car. I'm driving. We're chasing it, and Home Skillet's leaning out the passenger side window, cranking off shotgun rounds, and you've got your departmental shotgun in the front with you. Are you going to lean out the window and start returning fire like you're in an episode of Chips?
No, but maybe I'm just a wuss.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Why not?
Maybe that's
why
what it is.
are you not going to do that?
I went to that call once. Like, no shit. I went to a legit rolling gunfight. It was like a armed robbery at a whatever store, and suspects fled, and the call information coming in, this was down like at like Buckeye and like 27th to like 35th Ave, but it was more or less like an armed robbery that turned into a rolling gunfight. And I remember driving to it. I'm like, this sounds crazy, because dispatch kept sending like prompts like, oh, caller says he's following the suspect vehicle, and your cop brain was like, stop that. And it was like, victim says he's getting shot at, live like gunfire in the background, blah, blah, blah. And it was nonstop. And like, as we were heading there, it was like, how on earth are you going to handle? Because at this point, there was so much distance that they had covered per dispatch and what was being relayed, where you're like, how are you ever going to like deal with this? And it was like the most like real, like come to Jesus moment of like, okay, if I'm speeding to this and I happen to end up behind the suspect car, like, what am I going to do? And like, I would have to say that shooting back at it while we're doing 65 miles per hour was not the top thing that came to mind.
It's not. No.
I'm not saying that it's not a scenario that, maybe comes to that culmination. It all depends, but
yeah, there could be a situation where it makes sense, but 9 times out of 10, I'm thinking that's a bad idea.
Yeah, many times out of 10, I'm thinking distance is my friend. Get me an air unit, because those bullets, if I'm lucky, they hit my car, right? If I'm lucky, if I'm behind a suspect vehicle that's fleeing, they're actively firing, then yeah, the paperwork would suck on that. Like, if I'm actively following them, the best thing that could happen is distance and an air unit and a barricade. But there's scenarios where that's probably not preferable, right? Like, if that suspect vehicle that was just shooting at every police vehicle that was following it because it's an active pursuit, goes into an apartment complex, like, it might be negligent for me to let them get into an apartment.
Yeah.
And especially if I don't know whose apartment it is. So like if I'm in an industrial area or, it's after hours, like that gets factored in. I mean, you and I say this, and I say it to everyday people frequently, like, the details matter. And what seems like a trivial detail to one person or another could be wildly impactful in terms of what a prudent response / reasonable officer with, equal training experiences versus not, so based off of this, I'm not sure that I'm like leaning out of the window like Wyatt Earp in a stagecoach, but who knows? Tomahawk missile. Yes, that might be preferred.
I would just, I would say 99% of the time, I'm just going to say, no, we're not. And I think not most, but a lot of departments nowadays have that in their policy. You're not going to shoot from a moving vehicle. But there are always exceptions. One person just asked about what the weapon, like a weapon choice, like why you choose to carry certain things. And I think it's just like anything. Each weapon system is a different tool that is beneficial in certain circumstances and has flaws in the other. So like personally, I like to carry a 45 and an AR-15. I thought those were two my two best choices, but I also like to have a shotgun as an option for some, like my partner having a shotgun, because each weapon system is going to have its benefits for, you know, in a particular situation. Anything else before we watch the rest of this, Sean?
It's fun shooting a car with a shotgun.
Hidden in nearby bushes.
Works pretty good.
They also
So these
located
guys
additional
surrendered.
shotgun shells discarded along the route of the pursuit that were consistent with the type of ammunition found in the shotgun.
I have a feeling
the passenger, Andrew Guerrero,
evidence.
is a resident of Los Angeles, and at the time of his arrest had prior
Burglary,
convictions for
vehicle
weapons
theft,
violations, burglary, vehicle theft,
documented
and
gang
vandalism.
member.
He is also a documented gang member. The driver of the Honda was Daniel Salinas, a 29-year-old resident of Los Angeles. He had convictions for robbery,
Those officers got
weapons
lucky,
violations, vehicle
but
theft,
no one got hurt.
domestic violence,
And I have a
being
feeling they got made
convicted
fun of a
felon
lot
in
for that
possession
too.
of ammunition. He is also a documented gang member. On May 23, 2018, the Los Angeles County District Attorney filed several felony charges against Guerrero and Salinas, which included 2 counts of attempted murder of a police officer,
Fair enough.
2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer,
Fair
1 count
enough.
of shooting at an occupied vehicle, and 1 count of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. Additionally, Salinas
Those
was
guys
charged
had
with
felony
driving a stolen
convictions
vehicle
already?
and
You
felony
serious?
evading of police officers. Fortunately, the officers in this case were not injured
Which
by
in
a shotgun
Portland,
blast from the
you would have been
suspect
home by
vehicle
8 a.m.
or the traffic collision.
The LAPD is committed to bringing you information in a variety of ways so that you can get a full understanding of the complexities of policing, the challenges officers face in the line of duty, and when officers may use
All right,
force.
I think that's
We currently
that's
to be able to
basically it
find
on that one. All right. Got any final questions you want to address here before I pee my pants?
I'm gonna see if I can go and filibuster this thing to get you to do that. We might get a couple extra hearts and likes there.
It wouldn't be the first time I've peed my pants. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that's the key to being a manly adult. If you can recognize and acknowledge that. Thank you for everybody for checking in. We certainly appreciate the comments and engagement. If there's anything you want to see or hear, then email, text, or
the Twitter,
whatever. Tom,
tweet away.
Tweet.
Check out the website too. My email and everything's on the website. You can email me through the website. Go ahead.
Yep. Nope. Follow Tom on the website. Plenty of great things getting published now. You can read about all those fancy news articles. He's author in there. But thank you, and feel free to share with your friends and put this out, because that's ultimately how we generate better content and become sustainable and start doing this more and put out more content. So thank you to everybody.
And we'll be back next Sunday.
For sitting in with us.
Next Sunday at 9:00, and every Sunday we're here at 9:00. And then if you aren't getting enough of Sean and I, you can come back on Wednesday nights at 9:00 Central, and you can hear me do it solo.
How many people need to tell me to do it solo before I have to? What's that number?
I think you should.
I know you think it's 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
Realistically,
I don't know. I think another 2 people, and I think you're obligated by law to do it. I don't know. That could just be me.
Got such a low bar. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night, Tom. Love you,
too,
man.
And
appreciate you inviting me.
I always appreciate it. See, Slade is telling you to do it, and he's been here since the beginning. So now you have to do it. All right, guys.
3.